Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night. Hey there, believers. I got a great episode for you this week. Let me pull the microphone at least close to me. Um, got a great episode this week. I'm bringing on Valerie. Valerie and I have been texting on the bump phone since looks like late January, and it is the last day of March right now. We're finally getting a chance to talk. She has a ton of experiences, and she's grown in the faith. And she wanted to come on and just share some of the stuff that she's been going through. And I'm happy to have her on. I look forward to this conversation. Looking at the text, it looks like we have plenty to talk about, but I don't want to go into too much detail. I'll let her do that. Also, for those of you that don't know, I have just released my first book on Amazon. It is called The Army of God, Pocket Guide to Spiritual Warfare. It's available as of the 27th, I think, of March. It's had a pretty good opening so far. Thank you guys so much for the love and support. And I'm just excited about this. It's 12 different topics, 12 chapters in this book. And each chapter covers a different aspect of spiritual warfare and who it is behind it and what we can do about it through the power of Jesus Christ. Again, I'm really excited about it. I hope you check it out. It's just $12 on Amazon. It is available on Kindle. I forget how much it is on that. And they have they put out a hardback edition for me for like $19. So in whatever format you want it, it is available. Please be sure, if you do order the book, to leave a very kind review. It's my first time trying this, and I just hope it's a blessing to you. It was a blessing to me to put it together there. It's basically about a dozen lessons that I felt led to teach at church, compiled in book form and released. So there's that. If you have an experience you'd like to share, please holler at me at thebumppodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on the bump phone like Valerie did at 304-812-0553. Let's go ahead and bring her on now. All right. Take 3.
That's very typical of me anyways. I'm like usually really awkward with this kind of stuff, and so if I mumble or like repeat myself or anything, just have me to clarify because I want to chat, and this is exciting because it's been really cool like listening to your show and hearing everyone's experiences. But I can I don't I get nervous, so if I get off track, feel free to guide me back. But um, congratulations again because we weren't recording and I said it like 5 times, but you deserve it anyways. You
Well,
wrote a book. That's really cool. And it's
I
published.
appreciate it.
So
I appreciate it. It never quits being awkward. My wife's been teasing me about it, but yeah, it's fun. I didn't even tell her until I like submitted it to be published. So
that's
it's just
wild.
like I don't
That's
know why
kind
I
of
was
cool
surprised.
though, because then the genuine that must have been a cool feeling for her because she's finding out all of the feelings like come at once, like finding out the excitement, being proud of you, like, oh my gosh, you got to circle back to what like you did when you published a book. Like that would be really cool because it'd be cool to know, but like I guess to know the whole time you would be anticipating, and it kind of takes away that's kind of cool that you kept that to yourself. I don't blame you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was afraid really if I talked about it that something would happen and I wouldn't do it. So
That's generally how one of my like go-to things that I try when I learn something, whether it's from somebody else or because I made a mistake or whatever the scenario is, to actually learn from it and like
yeah,
implement it. And that's one of my go-tos is I don't it doesn't matter if it pertains to something I'm doing on the artistic side, like with music or whatever, or if it has to do with like leaving my 9 to 5 to start a business, like like, or even when our son was, because he was a micro preemie and he was in the NICU, people knew he was in the NICU, but we never posted any kind of anything that was negative. Like he was going through a lot of stuff that even like family members later like were like, "Whoa, we had no idea it was that intense," because we would only post like happy stuff online. Because even people who have good intentions, if they're not as faithful as you and they have like just the thought, like that thought is energy. So if someone puts out the thought like, nah, he's not gonna do good at this, or nah, I never pictured him doing that, like they may not, or I love him, but like I don't
right.
see that, or whatever. Like
Yeah.
it may not be intended to be ill like that, but it's just not the kind of energy that you want to bring into what you're trying to do. So
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, there's like well, the Bible says it. There's death and life is in the power of the tongue. So don't
yeah,
speak
yeah,
negative, just
yeah. But that's really cool. But yeah, I was I was listening to your podcast because I was stuck on this like RH negative thing, because I'm RH negative, and I never really, it was one of those things that I knew because I found out with the pregnancy, because that's how most women find out if they're RH negative when they're pregnant. And so they're like, "Hey, you're RH negative, so you have to get this shot." I don't know if you're familiar, but it's like you get this Rogan shot, and this because if you end up getting pregnant and the baby is not also RH negative, your body will fight the pregnancy, because that's one of the things that RH negative blood does, is it only accepts its own. So like in blood transfusions, we can't have any other type of blood given to us, or we go into like anaphylactic shock.
okay.
Like RH negative blood type have to receive RH negative blood type. So it's wild because you'll see like celebrities and people who are like really like paranoid about like accidents happening or whatever. They'll carry around like their people will have like their own blood. Like
Wow.
they'll have a storage of RH negative blood, like to have with them, which is kind of
Yeah.
extreme, but there was, anyway, I ended up, I don't know if someone was just talking about it or if you did a full episode. I don't know. Do you remember if you had something? Because that's how I found you. I ended up filtering episodes on the podcast, on just like the iPhone podcast platform,
Yeah.
and I put episodes instead of show because I knew there wouldn't be a ton of just like shows on it, but I thought that some people might have covered some episodes on it, and somehow I ended up on yours. And I think it came up in there was a episode about like the Nephilim, and
Hmm.
I think that's the episode that it came up on.
Okay. Well, probably. I feel like I know I've talked about it, but I cannot remember any details or when it was. But
Really?
the topic has come up, but I'm still not very educated on it. So yeah.
Well, I'm still learning, but I think you would be intrigued because you have spoken on experiences with like UFOs, and like you believe in like, alien life and like in all of these things. And also biblically, it's kind of weird the way that some of it ties into um what I do know. I don't know a ton, but what I do know about like my family history and like lineage and where we came from, because my maiden name was uh, Palmer, which is mostly Irish, but the Irish are the ones that dubbed us Palmer. It doesn't sound very Irish to me, I know I'm in a pink light, but I am like a natural redhead with fair skin and green eyes and everything, but most of my family members are not. I have a couple of uncles and cousins. Now, all the men in my family do have like raging red beards. Like
Really?
my brother grows a lumberjack beard. I mean, if you had a tint of red in your beard, you would just look like every family member of mine. I'm from Oklahoma, and all my cousins are like all like doesn't matter what head color hair they have. My brother's a blonde, dirty blonde, and he
Hey,
has tan skin.
that door just opened behind you. Is that anything I should?
It's a cat.
Right. Cool.
I appreciate you checking though, because that happens and stuff. Get out of there. But yeah, so I started binging a bunch of your episodes because I was listening to that episode, and it was just interesting because the Palmers. So they when they went on a holy pilgrimage, and when they came back from that pilgrimage, to prove that they had finished it, they brought back these huge pieces of palm tree. And that's what they handed over to the Irish as proof. And they dubbed them the Palmers. But there were some weird. So I went to this place in Ireland in like 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
And it was really cool because like you can go, like nothing was was like from the internet. Like you could go and tell them what you did know. So I tried to gather as much information as I could before this trip, and they would go through their library of books and any literature that they had, um, on what they would believe to be possibly your lineage, or for sure based on what you had. It just depended, you know? So
Right.
sometimes it was like loose information, sometimes it was very specific, but they had these, tables with all of the stuff laid out on it, and you walked through and they would explain it to you as you read it. And it was just so, you're like, oh my gosh, like every next thing you get to, you're like, oh my gosh, no way. That makes sense. Like what? And so part of the interesting things that stuck out to me when I started learning about RH negative, so there's some physical attributes that people with that blood type have. Some of it is because the interesting thing is they can't trace back where RH negative folks came from.
Right.
They know it's not from Earth though. And so they don't know if that's why there are two main theories on where RH negative, this blood type, came from. One of them leans more heavily towards some type of alien DNA, rather it came in, on like a meteor, or like aliens actually came, or if they were, messing around with different species or whatever. But it's just not from Earth. It didn't originate from Earth. It ended up here, obviously, but they have not been able to prove that it originated from here at all. And another interesting thing is that we're geographically, a lot of those people are in Europe. So I don't remember the exact percentage anymore, but it's a very low percentage of RH negative people. And then a very, like worldwide, there's like real densely populated areas. There's actually one city, I could look it up, but let me look real quick because there's a city in Europe. I'll look in a minute or I'll get distracted. But it starts with a B, but they have the most heavily populated group of RH negative people in the world. And a lot of them do typically come from like northern, like Europe areas. So light skin, red hair, light skin, blonde, blue eyes, green eyes is very typical. But there are a lot of other weird physical attributes, like having extra vertebrae. So I have technically an extra vertebrae because in my lower back, one of my vertebrae never completely diffused. So it's like two stacked on each other.
Wow.
And I have had like all sorts of weird bone stuff in my life. Like I've never had a broken bone, which is a different like side note that a lot of people have theories on spiritually. If you've never had a broken bone, I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but it's kind of like, oh, you've got extra protection on you because something is typically like you need protection from. And so there's like, I don't know how someone biblically tied it back. There was an app where you can like type in topics
Okay.
and it'll tie it back to scripture. And it talked about if you had never had a broken bone, it kind of translated into some sort of like having extra protection, which I thought was cool. But I've had stuff come out of socket repeatedly, and like I have the extra vertebrae, so I've dealt with that because I used to be an EMT and I would like have to bend over. And then I worked in an allergy lab, so I was hunched over all the time, like mixing meds and injecting people with, so I was always like with men. And now I'm a tattoo artist, and so I'm like bent over all the time. And so I've dealt with like the vertebrae stuff, but that's like, oh, okay, whatever, that's life. So then I would go get the x-rays. That's when I found out about the extra vertebrae, which they're like, whatever, this happens. It's not, common, but it's not like anything to worry about. Some people have extra ribs, and the doctors will just say, hey, if you're not uncomfortable, then there's no reason to mess with it. Just it's there for a
Right.
reason. So just leave it alone. But I had extra teeth. I had a lot of extra teeth, not just like, oh, I went to go get my wisdom teeth. I have one or two. I had my full set of wisdom teeth, and then I had um, 4 extra wisdom teeth in my actual mouth, and then I had 2 full grown teeth with the roots and everything in my frontal sinus cavity that I had to
Wow.
have surgically removed. So I was full of teeth.
Yeah.
And that's something that kind of comes up over and over with RH negative when I'm doing my research, just like the weird bone stuff.
Well, that kind of lends credence to the whole Nephilim theory. They said that the giants had 2 rows of teeth,
Hmm.
so that's plenty of extra
And then I
teeth.
recently saw something because I follow so many science articles and stuff, and they said scientists have recently discovered that, I don't know if it's we have the ability to regrow like a third set of teeth, because I guess they said third because I didn't read the whole thing in depth, but I guess because we have our baby teeth and then we have our teeth as adults, and
Right.
they're saying that we have the ability to grow a third set of teeth. So I didn't. What I automatically took from that was, without reading it in depth, is that we like shut that off at some point. But that was interesting too, because the whole RH negative thing, going back to the alien thing, and people like to tie it to like, oh, if there's ever like any kind of biomedical warfare, RH negative people are more likely to survive because we have copper based blood, not carbon based blood. And copper based blood is what's used, they use snow crab blood in like vaccines and things like that, because they and it's bright blue. It's crazy. I don't know if you've ever seen snow crab
Okay.
blood
Yeah.
before, but it's wild to see. And they use that for to make vaccines and stuff. And so it's interesting, because they thought, oh, maybe this was planning for the future, like to make sure that there were at least some that survived, of that bloodline, whatever that
Yeah.
bloodline may be. So that's something that gets brought up a lot, is the fact that we're more likely to fight off viruses and things like that, with the RH negative blood than most other blood types, if not all of them, I think, because of that copper factor.
That is
The
fascinating.
copper the copper factor is cool too, because people, including myself, this is one of the weird things that I try not to ask the question why too much when it comes to experiences or aha moments or anything, unless like the why is the lesson, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
if that makes sense, because I don't want to get hung up in why that, like just pay attention to what the message was, and like I try to keep things simple and go from there. Like if it leads me into some in-depth thing, fine. But there have been times since when I was young that I would hear what sounded like an AM FM radio being like tuned in and out, or like someone trying to find a station or something. And sometimes, you know how like when you're trying to find a station, like I have an old vinyl player over there that has a old school AM FM radio on it. And so when you're like flipping through and tuning to get into stations, it does that staticky noise, and then you'll hear music coming in and out, you'll hear voices coming in and out, and you'll hear like the in between, like all the noises, you
Oh
know?
yeah.
And I used to hear that and think, oh, like my grandpa's listening to like trying to find like a baseball game on the radio or something, and I would get up and walk through the house and no one would be awake and there wouldn't be any kind of radio. And it wasn't scary or anything, it was just confusing because it would happen in so many different places. Sometimes it would happen like in the car, and that would be weird because I would be listening to something else in the car.
Yeah.
So it would, and that wasn't interrupted. So I knew it wasn't the car.
Right.
like,
Not the radio. Yeah.
but as I started digging into the copper-based blood, there were people who were Rh negative who are on record being like basically deemed crazy because people thought that they were just hearing voices, but they were picking up on frequencies because of the copper in their blood. And so I believe I've legitimately multiple times heard music that I thought even at times was me having a song pop in my head until I would hear like the static or something that, like you wouldn't hear. Um, and so that was really cool because it really kind of brought me some comfort, but also I was like, whoa, that's wild. Like my blood, because it's copper based, like might legitimately be, I mean, that's a proven thing that happens. And that's a more like for those people who are like always having to break something down to science, well, they've
Right.
done that. So I thought that was intriguing. And I think even like Dolly Parton talked about how she heard stuff like that in her head because she had copper dental work done, because back in the day they would put copper in people's mouths. And every time she drove past this radio station, she would hear, and people didn't believe her.
Right.
But back to the Rh negative people being deemed crazy, like they would put them in like psych wards and stuff because
Oh,
they were like, I'm hearing music, I'm hearing voices, and they didn't know, about
right.
the Rh negative factor back then. So
That is completely wild. I had no idea about that. I
yeah, I
had
think it's
no
pretty
clue.
cool.
That is cool. You're going to send me down a rabbit hole looking for this.
You should. It's so interesting, and you really can find a lot of really intriguing like podcast episodes where they've brought on different people who have,
Well,
tied it back to lots of science and then lots of other things. Like I said, the alien thing, like that's a huge major
yeah.
theory. The two major theories, to get back to that, is the alien thing and then the Nephilim. And it what's interesting about that is that, I was like, why was my family going on this like holy pilgrimage? Like what led them to do this? Like what was changing that was so important in that time in their lives as an entire family and generations, that they were like, we are all doing this pilgrimage together.
Right.
And the Irish dubbed them the Palmers and everything. And I the more I started reading about some of like the actual timeline, how far it went back, like how you see like those weird facts where it's like this person was still alive when this was invented, and you're like, no way, that was like hundreds of years apart, because like just how quickly things change, and when you
Yeah.
picture one thing you picture another, you're like, there's no way they were that close together.
Yeah.
I was realizing that my family was tromping around back there when the Nephilim were believed to have existed. I don't have any evidence that there were any in my family, but the timelines with some of what we found and we're tying in, because there was a lot of stuff missing and a lot of stuff there, but it's like a lot of the information would not be anything that would stick in my head had I not started in the last like few years kind of paying more attention to like educate. I've always had the curiosity in my experiences, but I never really took the time to invest in like educating myself based on other people's experiences. Or I've always been really into science. Like I didn't end up graduating, but I studied biochemistry and I love science and I love like astrology and astronomy and all of it, and like just it so it's all interesting. And so there's like the alien thing and then the fallen angel, it's like
Yeah.
which could it be? And it's hard because you start seeing like people bringing up different points to try to because tie in like why those two theories exist,
Right.
and they're both very intriguing, like
What
they
if they're
really are.
one?
There's
What if they're one and the same? Yeah.
for real though, that is the thought that,
Yeah.
yeah, I, yeah.
Have you ever done like a like ancestry DNA or anything like that?
So that's so it's funny you asked that because I don't know what it is. There's weird stuff, man, tied around like the timing of, I say timing because let me just say I've gone to donate blood so many times. Like so many times. Like I said, I studied as an EMT and I did all these things where I had opportunities and I even went on my own. And then even when I found out I was RH negative, I was like, well, I want to donate so other RH negative people have RH negative blood if they need it. And every single time I've gone to donate blood, something has happened. And it's over my entire life since I was old enough to donate blood. And I mean, to the point, if it's either something before I get to the appointment and I have to reschedule, that's all normal. But I'm talking like I get there and I pass everything. I go through the physical they make you do. I answer all the questions. I'm healthy, like all that. And something will happen. Before I had tattoos, it was because, oh, I heard you sniffle. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's like the wind is blowing a million miles an hour when I walked in. And well, we're going to have to reschedule you. Fine. Then I ended up getting tattoos, and they're like, oh, you've got one covering your good. You can't push a needle through a tattoo because we don't want
What?
the ink getting into the blood. So, well, this one's not as bad as that one. And I mean, I've been scheduled and like had nurses come out and had like 3 or 4 people around me trying to decide if they feel comfortable approving it or not. And I finally gave up on it. And then the ancestry thing, I think I want to just say screw it and do it, but
Yeah.
I always just had a feeling not to do that for some reason. And I don't know why. And like I said, I try not to ask why a lot. But then that whole like 23andMe thing came out where it was like they were supposedly like
Yeah.
sharing information with Google because they had like a married couple or some. I may be getting those details wrong, but you know what I'm talking about?
They sold all the information. They sold all your DNA results and stuff like that.
Which is wild because they can use that for so many things. Like people are
Yeah.
like, why? Why do you care? Like, who cares if they have a DNA? Okay, well, if they know what you're likely to get sick with or what you do have, could have, you don't even know,
Yep.
then they'll find ways to like make more money off of that for sure. And then there are people who say, they do track, and why wouldn't they track RH negative people? Why wouldn't they track people that they don't know where they came from and there's so few of them? Like, why would they not want to try to gather as much information as they could? And so I guess I was kind of like, well, if I do any of those DNA things, then they're definitely going to know where I'm at. And
That's a
so
good
I'm like,
point.
whatever at this point, if they do, they do. But because I have a friend who does all that, and she was like, I'm so curious now. We need to do it because I thought I could add on to what I found in Ireland.
Mhm.
So I think I'm going to, and I definitely will get back to you if I find out anything interesting on that end.
Please do. I did it, and I know like I am a big time critical thinker. You know, you can call it conspiracy theorist, whatever, but I did it because
Yeah,
my curiosity for my ancestry and my heritage,
it was too
you know,
strong.
yeah, it outweighed like the what ifs. And
That's
I,
how I'm feeling now. I think before I was like, oh, it's not, worth because what are you gonna do with that anyway? But now because it's like I'm so invested in on all these different things that involve like where where you came from,
yep,
like, and then it just makes it that much more intriguing when you go and find out you're RH negative. Well, again, when I first found out, to be honest, I was like, oh, okay, it's just a blood type that, it fights pregnancy. So I just have to do this, is whatever. I never really looked much further into it because it's not like they come into the hospital room and say, this is so weird. Like, you're
right.
never going to believe you have copper-based blood and da da da. Like, they don't tell you any of that. So you
Yeah,
don't know how different it is until you actually start looking into it. And it's interesting. I'm trying to think what were the other, but the Nephilim thing is a huge like theory, and I just wondered. I was like, man, if my family was like, maybe they knew that they had Nephilim in their bloodline and the family some way somehow at one point, even if it wasn't like then,
yeah,
and they were trying to get the family right with God, and like get and make sure, because that's a big thing that's talked about on different, I've noticed on like podcasts and conversations where people talk about the Nephilim,
yeah,
including yours, is like, hey, say you are from that bloodline, does that mean that you're doomed to hell or anything like that? And
right,
like, I think most Christians, as far as I have heard, again, it may not be you, but correct me if I'm wrong, but like, no, like
right.
I'm a follower of Christ and I'm good. Like, I'm not good. I don't believe that my God is sending me to hell because some family, couldn't keep it in their pants. It's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
and it ended up being, like so this big crazy. It's like, imagine having someone over for dinner like at that time, and it's like, so who's your, uncle
Right.
over there? It's like, oh, it's a whole story. So,
Yeah, 28 generations ago, somebody slept with an angel and it's your
yes,
fault. No,
yes,
I don't think it works like that either.
yeah. But those are kind of the two. So that was interesting with that. But then listening to your podcast, there were so many other things that are just like, I don't know. I grew up in a really small country town in Oklahoma, and it's actually funny. It's literally so I had at one point, I for many years lived in a house on this hill called Kavanaugh Hill. And Kavanaugh Hill is geographically the world's largest hill because it's 1 foot. That big old monster is 1 foot away from being a mountain.
Oh, wow. So close.
So we used to go stack bricks on it and be like, she's a mountain. Leave her alone. um, but it's a country town. It's as far southeast as you can go in Oklahoma. It's right on the Arkansas border.
Sweet.
Um, and so I had a lot of like outdoor, like so I was outside a lot. I did a lot of camping and fishing, and um, I had like kind of an inconsistent childhood, but that part of my life was like real consistent, and it was mostly possible because my grandparents, they had a big bit of land out there, and we're very proud of it and took care of it. And that's what all of us grandkids did. We would go ride the four-wheelers, and he would,
Absolutely.
yeah, he built us literally like, when I say playhouse, like it was a house. It had carpet, electricity, it had a fridge. It was badass.
Yeah.
And yeah, so but because of that, like I think I like was exposed to a diverse uh, group of experiences. Like some of my experiences as a child, I guess, were a lot different, but helped me understand experiences I have now that are totally different. And I've been out of Oklahoma for a long time, but um, so some of the things when I was young is, it's interesting because it was as far as I remember when I was young, when I would experience anything spiritual or just something that I didn't quite know how to explain, but felt like it was just supposed to happen or supposed to be there or whatever. So like, my mom was a single mom for a lot of my childhood, and she wasn't home a lot. And I mean, I would just be at home alone, like not trying to talk ill of
Right.
my mother because she's had lots of struggles and we're very open about it and all of that, and we're in a good place now. But she, had me very young. Like I'm was born in 85 and she was 17 uh, when she got pregnant, and 18 when I was born. And so she was a baby. And
All right.
she'd be out busting her tail, and I'd be at home. And sometimes, it just, sorry,
That's
cats.
fine.
Sometimes it just, I would pray because we
Mhm.
did grow up. Well, I prayed all the time, but sometimes these experiences would take place like when I would feel the need to like really like pray, like almost like I just somehow knew, even though I was a little kid, like prayer right now is the only thing that is going to keep you safe. And I didn't even always know what from, but you know, I don't know how familiar you are with small country towns. There's beautiful elements of them, but there's a lot of crazy freaking people in small country towns, and
Yeah, I
a lot
feel
of bored people, and a lot of drugs, and like a lot of just bad stuff, and that you can just bump into. And so, yeah, sometimes I would sit in the middle of a living room floor and just kind of curl, like sit with my knees up to my chest. When I say little, I was like 5 or 6. I, I'm most of my memories when I really think hard started when I was like 6, like the clear ones where I'm like, sure, like, this is what happened, and the details have always stayed the same. And it just, I know it happened. But so I was sitting there one night, and my mom just, she had called, on the home phone, and so, I'm still stuck. She worked at like a Pizza Hut or something. I think she worked at like a Pizza Hut, and she also worked for a newspaper. And so she was like, "Yeah, I'm stuck at this Pizza Hut." I'm like, "All right." And so I don't know. I didn't want a TV on. I didn't want a radio on. I didn't want any noise because I wasn't like, I need to hear what's going on. Something bad's going to happen. But I just had this overwhelming, like, I remember clear as day, just, you need to settle because you need to listen.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know why I understood that at such a young age with there not being a person there
All right.
telling me this. But I was like, okay. And
Huh.
like, I settled in the middle of the floor and I just pulled my knees to my chest and I kind of had my chin down and was just breathing and just staying quiet. And when I opened my eyes and looked over, at first I thought, oh, weird, the light must have changed because, it's like, I know, the lights in your house, like, where things are and where they typically are and what there was no like street light outside that window or anything that could have come on. So I was at first thinking, does someone have a flashlight out there? But it wasn't moving. Somehow there was enough light to create what I thought was my shadow because it was in the same position and it seemed to be a young child. And it was like this, if you understand, like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, with the knees up to the chest and like just holding on, but had the most massive wings that
Really.
were just curled up behind its back. And it was just, even though it wasn't speaking, it's like I knew,
Wow.
like I heard, like, "You're good, I'm here. I'll stay with you until she gets home." And it was weird because my concept of time, because I remember when my mom came home and she was like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Oh my god, it was so long, and couldn't even get a way to call you, and I was just so worried. And what are you still doing up?" And I was like, "What time is it?" And it had been several hours after that phone call when I sat down on the floor, and I honestly thought my mom walked in like a couple minutes after that moment happened. And so that was kind of my first, but again, it wasn't like, "Oh, that was weird."
Right.
I think that's what's changed as I've gotten older, and what I've been trying to reconnect with again is, like, myself as a child, but with the knowledge and lessons that I've learned, because I miss that innocence of just, like, not having to feel taboo or weird or figure shit out all the oh, sorry,
You're
I
good.
curse that I don't curse a lot, but
You're fine.
but trying to figure stuff out, and it's like, what when you get past that, you kind of feel childlike with it again, but I don't know, and I'm big on faith. Faith, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of the unseen. And even when I was a kid, that's when I learned it. Was when I was a kid. I learned that in either in church or at one of the church camps that I went to, because I grew up in a family that was a really religious and went to we were in church 3 days a week, but you know how it is, some days 2 days, or two times in that day. And
Yeah.
then I did extra curricular activities with the church, like I did fine arts festivals. And I don't know if you know what human videos are, but it's like interpretive dance in the Christian world, and they have like big competitions for it and everything. Like, dude, I was all over the church scene, and like, but I think um things didn't like tie together and make sense for me until I was older. And but I know that I accepted Christ when I was young, and I knew what I was doing, and that I also allowed the Holy Spirit to, use me and take over me, because I didn't really know um a lot about, and I know you've had a lot of guests who don't know how to explain like demons, spirits, ghosts, whatever, entities and energies and all of that.
Right.
So though that can still be confusing, it's for sure confusing when you're young, because you're open and curious, but you get shut down a lot based on adults' perspectives and opinions. And for sure in the religious community, it's always going to be guided into whatever dialogue their view is, at least when I was young and growing up in that small town. I'm not judging churches or anything like that, because what I'm getting to is that I carried a lot with me because of that. It instilled a lot in me that I know has gotten me through times even when I didn't realize it. Like, that was a huge reason why I believe I was okay. But uh, it was confusing when I was young, because I would try to ask questions, and a lot of times old school folks don't like you asking questions, which I don't understand. Because I'm
I,
like, if you're so tied into your beliefs and so serious about something, like, you got to be able to talk about it and just be like, yeah, this is why I believe this.
yeah. I think a lot of times when people that are in tradition,
Hmm.
when they get asked a question that's outside of their box, they shut you down because they don't know the answer.
Right.
And it's easier to hush a kid up than try to think for yourself. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
And I think, like, going back to experiencing things and seeing things, a lot of times when I would experience things like this, because I don't even like saying like it started happening more and more. I think it was just more that I was aware of it more and more. And like, as an adult now, like, I know that I can definitely see the difference in how many things I'm able to recognize and utilize. Sorry, I'm drinking this bubbly water and it,
You're good.
it made me burp. But when I am talking to God more and on track and trying to focus on, you know, uh not doing anything specific that people say you have to do, but literally just my relationship with God, whatever it is that day I feel like I need to do. So I'm not on anybody else's agenda. And if I feel like I want to go to church, I'll find someone or I'll go to church. If I feel like I need to pray more that day, even though I've already prayed, I will. If I have something on my mind that I want to have a conversation, with God about, I will, because it's like, even when I was young, I remember sometimes praying and apologizing to God, like, "Hey, I'm sorry that I kind of only pray when I want something. I realize that."
Good.
Like,
That's good.
I was aware of it, but and I felt bad, but I was like, I'm still gonna pray because I do believe in the power of prayer and I really want this really bad. So,
Right.
you grow in that relationship, but you got to put in, like, you have to actively participate in it. And I think that that's the simplicity that I was not like, that didn't click until um I was maybe like 10 years ago. And like,
Right.
never, and even times I fell out in that 10 years on like not allowing the outside circumstances to like just put a pause on that, because I never like got into anything or did anything. I've always been good and nice and kind to people, but I mean like falling off, like putting a pause on
Right.
actively working on that growth and
Yeah.
talking to God, and like, because I'm like, duh, like if you're not talking to him, like how is he supposed to, like, you just want him to like every day be like, hello, which sometimes I feel like he was, you know what I mean? And like he
Right.
does all the time, and we just like miss so much. But when I'm at least trying and I'm actively like, hey, and I talk to my consciousness a lot. It's like a new thing that I started doing maybe like a year ago. Like, instead of just thinking thoughts, like I actually will address my own consciousness, because I feel like it makes it click more for me. Like if I'm trying to focus on something,
Right.
I'm like, hey, consciousness, help me focus on getting this done. Or even like, I gotta remember that in the morning. So instead of just saying I gotta remember that in the morning, I'm like, yo, consciousness, take notes in the morning. Let me know. Okay. Thanks. And like, it does activate something in your brain. And I don't know if it's just your brain or if it's in your spirit, but
Right.
it's all there. And anyway, so back to like being a kid and experiencing things. I had, I witnessed a possession in my church, and it was a legitimate possession. And I know a lot of people have a lot of really weird, like, no, 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 I don't believe that's just people acting, or they've got some sort of mental disability, or they have a physical whatever. And absolutely, I think no matter what topic you're talking about, there are always going to be people who want attention and do things and falsify things. But this was a legitimate possession. And the reason I know it is because I was holding his hand. And right before it all went down, and I'll explain the story because it's a wild story. And like, I could feel it in my spirit. Like, okay, we were at church and we were in it was the youth room where this happened. And it was a mixed group of ages. So we had the young ones were always, separated, but like, then you had some like, like 8, 9, 10, 11, like, and then older
Right.
kids in there. And anyway, we were doing the, praise and worship portion of, the day. And it came a point where the young girl that was on the stage said, I don't know why. And she giggled and said, I know this is kind of cheesy, but um, let's hold hands and sing Jesus Loves Me. And she just kept giggling, and she was like, she was like, "Oh, this is so silly." Like, and everyone's kind of looking at each other like, really? Like, okay.
All right.
Like, really? Because we were into some really good praise and worship too. And it was, we had youth people playing, and it was just, vibe. But we're like, fine. So I was one of the like older kids that was placed in with some of the younger kids. And so we were holding hands, and this young boy is next to me, super quiet the whole time, had been. He was there with his brother. I had never seen them before. They came in on the bus. I know that the bus had picked them up from their home and brought them. And because I had helped walk the kids in off the bus. So I'd seen them get off the bus. And so, anyway, we're holding hands. We start singing Jesus Loves Me. And this will, like, I'll dive into one of the revelations I've had recently, just like a duh reminder, but about the actual power of like Jesus's name
Amen.
and how it's like literal. I don't even know. But we started singing that song, and I just felt him squeezing my hand tighter and tighter and tighter, and it was literally getting to the point where I couldn't stand it, and I was like, ow, and I started trying to like pry his little hand off of me, and he was a little boy,
Yeah.
and I could not pry his hand off of me, and it was making me really uncomfortable, but I was trying not to disturb anybody. And he finally like breaks off of me and bolts out the door and down the stairs, which led into the gymnasium. And they kind of look at me like, go get him. I get down the stairs, and someone else had already approached him, because in that gymnasium, we would typically after service meet up, and they had women in there preparing food and stuff like that. So someone had like approached him like, hey, do you want to go back up to the class? And I don't know what happened with that interaction, because I was still coming down the stairs, but it freaked the woman out so bad that she ran into the service that was still going in the main service room with the adults with pastor, and interrupted and said, I need you to come to the gym. And
Wow.
he came to the gym, and when he walked in, the boy pointed at him and started cursing and spitting and saying, get him away from me, and calling him all kinds of names. And they set him up on a table, and the table was like those, they had gotten these tables from an old arcade that shut down and put them in our gymnasium, and they were like the picnic style tables, but everything's connected. So it's the wood table, and then the booth, you can get in the booth and like sit in. So it was thick, it was like real thick wood, and they were sturdy. Like, this wasn't like a little. And again, the kid was a pretty small kid, and they set him up on the table so they could be at eye level, and they were trying to talk to him, and they were going to start praying and everything. And he banged his fist on the table, and the table just like cracked down the middle, and they had to remove him because then it was so heavy from the like seating that it was like caving in. So
Wow.
they lay him on the floor, and he just straightens his whole body up, and his little brother at this point shows up, and they both wore like cowboy boots, and he was kicking his little brother. You always do this when we try to go places. What is it that's wrong with you? Why do you do this when we go places? Like, why does this come out in you? Tell it to go away. And he's like, I just wanted to get out of the house, because I found out later that like they had an abusive like household, and it was just a really dark place, and the church was one of the only ways that they could get out. And this kid was absolutely possessed. His voice changed. I felt it like go through me and the pastor told us to leave. He said, if you are not saved right now, and if you're not a follower of Christ and haven't accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, then you need to leave the room, because I am trying to get this thing out, and you don't want it to get in you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this was really happening, and you hear about it, but I was like, oh my gosh. Like, and the biggest thing for me was his reaction to the name Jesus. It all started with the song.
Yeah.
It wasn't all the theatrics, though it wasn't. It was real. It was what I felt when we started singing Jesus Loves Me and he was holding my hand. Like, I don't know how to explain the feeling, but that was one of my first like, oh, okay, wow, that's real. So in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what does that mean? Like so many questions,
Yeah.
what does it mean? Where does it come from? Like, what does it mean for me? What am I supposed to do? Can that happen to me? Like, what do I do? Uh, if I have a bad day, and I'm not being a good girl, like, is
Right.
that an invitation? So I think God put that in my life so that not that I would be a worrywart, but so that I would be conscious of, hey, things can, if you open yourself up to things, like things can. That's why I don't mess. And I think I heard you say you don't mess with Ouija boards,
Oh
like
no,
you
what?
did once before or something, or you,
I've been around it. Yeah.
dude, no, never, ever, ever. And like, I don't know. Even just like walking around my house, it's my husband knows it's like a common thing for me to say, because my husband has seen, like, bro, why do I always see? Because he doesn't see stuff like I do all the time, and he doesn't experience that, but he believes everything. He knows everything about my life, and
Right.
he like full heartedly is like, no, I see it, I feel it. Like you are open to those things, and it happens to you, and it is what it is. Um, his grandmother was that way, and he's Puerto Rican, and it's like she believed in like reincarnation because she had almost like had PTSD from what she said was her previous life as a general in one of the like in the military in like one of the wars. And
Oh,
like she thought they were dreams at first, but then she would have it like during the day, and like actual feelings of like, oh, things would scare her that shouldn't
right.
scare her, because as her in her life, like she didn't experience anything that would make her afraid of that thing.
Yeah.
But then she started having, and it wasn't like all the same vision over and over, it was like memories of like years worth of stuff that happened in
Yeah.
this other life. And she, was like, oh, I didn't want how you felt. Most of the time, she's like, when I go to talk about these things with people, because she's now passed, but she was like, I would say, don't think I'm weird, but she was like, no, 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 I felt the need to tell you because I feel like you just believe in that kind of, you're good with that or whatever. But even my husband will be like, oh, I see something coming up and down the stairs all the time. But I don't, even though it kind of freaks me out, he's like, I actually am not scared, because he goes, I know how hardcore you are about the protection of our house and everything. And
Yeah.
even just when I'm walking, like vacuuming or something, if I feel any kind of inkling of any kind of negative energy for whatever reason, I'm just like, nope, only good is allowed here. And if I get real freaked out, will just call on all things good. I'm like, God, I'm calling on you now for all things good. I don't know if you got some angels that are free. If you got like my grandma who has passed, grandpa, you're a badass. If you could show up right now, that'd be dope. Like, whoever's down to like protect me right now, because I'm feeling really creeped out, And like, I really truly believe like I can feel that energy shift, But again, back to the power of the name of Jesus, like
That's it.
ending everything, in Jesus' name. Someone said something recently online I saw that was really interesting. And it was like, hey, when you pray, if you just pray, that's cool. But like, you basically are sending your prayer, if you leave it open ended, like you're basically sending this prayer out into the world. It's like mailing a letter without putting it in a sealed envelope. So like, yeah, you put the prayer out there, but everybody who gains access to it has it and can see it and read it, and then they can do with that what they want. If they have good intentions and they know what you're praying about, cool, maybe they're going to put some good energy towards that. But if they have bad intentions, or if they're a bad entity that wants to be able to manipulate you or take advantage in any kind of way, they know what you're praying about. They know your weaknesses now. Like, they can
Mm.
manipulate. Like, if you pray and you end it in Jesus' name, that seals your prayer. Your prayer is protected, and no one has access to that prayer. Like, it's locked up. So there's power in that, because it's yours and his alone. Like,
I've never
nobody
heard it.
can do.
I've never heard
Yeah.
it put like that before. But
I know, me neither, and I thought it was pretty cool.
that is pretty cool. I do know in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, maybe 9 or 10, I think it's 9. He is Daniel's praying to God,
I'll write it.
and his prayer gets blocked. The answer of his prayer gets blocked. The angel Gabriel is coming to answer his prayer, and he gets tied up for 3 weeks by a principality.
I'm gonna have to go back and revisit. That's really cool. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not cool,
it's
but
a super interesting, because Daniel winds up fasting for 21 days in 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 waiting for this prayer to be answered, and the whole 21 days where he's fighting his flesh and fasting, Gabriel is fighting this principality to get down and let him know that his prayer's been heard, and it's super intense. It's good.
well, that makes sense, because again, it's like your prayers are heard, but not just by the intended, receiver.
Right.
Now everybody's kind of, it's like, listen to it on the radio. They're like, oh, he's praying about this. Let's go.
It's kind of like well, maybe it's kind of like one of those here back in the day, like 30, 40 years ago, they had party lines. It's like
Yeah.
a whole little community would have one open phone line at all times. So you just pick up the phone and listen into other people's conversations. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was called a
That's
party line.
wild.
So it's kind of like that. If you're saying it out loud,
Yeah.
whatever's around is going to hear you.
And your prayers, I mean, that's, granted, there are a lot of selfish, prayers being sent out and like floating around, but like, hey man, like prayers are pretty intense and like it's telling of a lot. Like you're really sharing a lot when you feel that. I mean, if you feel the need to pray in the first place, it's obviously something important,
Right.
you know?
And that's why some people, they'll pray silently. They'll pray in their
Mm-hmm.
mind, because the devil can't read your mind. They can put
But
stuff in there. They can whisper, but they can't read your mind. And some people think, some people believe in praying in tongues,
yeah,
in an unknown language, a language
yeah.
between you and God. And so, yeah, there's and praying in the name of Jesus. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I grew up around that, and I've had people make fun of it, and I get it, and I've never taken offense. I didn't go around my whole life praying in tongues, but I grew up around it where it happened every day in church almost, and it was normal. And I remember like when our church choir, because my small town, it was small, but we had like the biggest choir in the whole like that choir was massive. It was insane. I was like, is there anyone in school not in choir? And one day our church like hosted a thing, and so they came, our choir came, and we performed, but and I think it was like Christmas, so it was like we were doing a whole Christmas bit. But we set for a sermon first. And when
Yeah.
people would stand up and start speaking in tongues, there were people from my school like, what is this? Like,
Right.
holy cow, like, oh my god. And they're talking about it afterwards. And like I had taken I tried to take friends to church and stuff like that, and they're like, that's just too much for me, it's weird. And I get it, and I didn't necessarily like, it was explained to me, and it's not that I didn't grasp the concept of it, but I feel like sometimes you understand something, but sometimes it's like something takes over you like a blanket or something, and it's that like aha blanket, like, because it's not just like a moment, it's like it sinks in, like, oh my gosh, like the whole thing makes sense now, and you're like, why did this just now occur to me like this?
Right.
And speaking in tongues was one of those things. And you know the sealed prayer thing is kind of, even though I had never heard that envelope thing that I just told you about,
Right.
the sealed prayer thing, like, just because honestly, as an adult, the only time that speaking in tongues has ever come back up in my like nature is when I feel, for whatever reason, again, it goes back to, I've always been open to and try to not question why, like that overwhelming feeling of pray, but like don't let him know.
Yep.
Okay. So then I just would speak, pray in tongues. And again, it was just because I was thinking it, I knew God was getting it and no one else would. But that didn't really occur to me until I was much older. Because when I was growing up, I was open to it and it wasn't weird to me, but I didn't have that overwhelming understanding of, for me anyway. And I'm not saying that that's why everyone speaks in tongues by any means, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm very open to it. I personally have not spoken in tongues,
Mm-hmm.
but my pastor does. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of people in my church that do, and I'm totally down for it. And if the Holy Spirit ever wants to put that on me as a gift, then I'm ready and willing. But
And I think too, it's like when I was young, um, I felt silly a couple of times, but again, it went back to like me being alone and like being in situations where I was probably just scared and I didn't even know exactly what I was praying for, what I needed to pray for, like specifically.
right,
So it wasn't at that time about masking my prayer. It was more like, I know I need to pray and I believe in you, so I'm gonna, but can you like give me the words? Cause I don't know kind of thing.
it's biblical
And
too,
okay.
that our spirit will speak with like
Hmm.
a groaning or an utterance that we don't even understand how to say it. The spirit
Yes.
will do it for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Um, moving along with like experiences, like as I got older, I didn't, I don't want to say that I've ever seen, like, I've heard people like just straight up say, I can see when someone's possessed. Like, I can see it like latched onto them. I can see like an entity. I have not experienced that where it's like there's this person and this other thing.
Right.
But before I even knew what auras were, I saw light variations, color variations, almost texture variations, like sometimes smoky versus almost watery, even though it's not water, like just the movement of the light and
Yeah.
or static, or even kind of, have you ever seen that? It's like a metal, like, or magnetic, like the liquid,
Oh
like
yeah.
what they
Yeah.
base what's the
Venom.
show, babe? With, sorry, he just walked in, so you hear the door. What's the show with that we like where the black gooky thing takes over the body? The like villain that talks, the
Is it Venom?
Venom.
Yep.
Oh, were you saying it?
It's all right.
Sorry, it's so
It's all right.
quiet. He's like Venom. Um, like that kind
Yeah.
of, but not to that degree. I'm just saying with like if I saw light or dark and things like that, sometimes it was textured, sometimes it wasn't, stuff like that. But
Right.
I thought that was just normal, and maybe it is. Like I even feel weird saying I thought it was normal because maybe it is. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
just that less people are like open to it, so it's become less normal. But at one time, maybe it was just to walk around and be like, "Ew, bad aura, bye." You know, like, because I mean, it's a way of protecting yourself. I don't know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to survive, like, just as a species, we develop ways of protecting ourselves, just like animals and plants. And so, why not be able to like look at someone and like read their energy and be like, nope, negative,
Yeah.
or yes, like that's somebody that I should be around, kind of thing. Um, and so sometimes it wasn't that that thing was interesting or scary or exciting or scary, but I remember I have like vivid memories of like, honestly, with that, because I told you earlier most of my memories started when I was 6, but like I remember being in like pre-K when I was probably like 5, and like seeing some people come in, and it's like most of the people would be normal, but these some people every once in a while, I would see these auras on them, and I would either be like excited, like, oh my gosh, like, and I would just walk up to, I remember a woman that walked into my pre K class to give some paperwork to my teacher. She was staff, but I don't know what she was. I have no idea.
Right.
Um, don't even remember what her face looked like. But I remember what she was wearing and I remember what her aura looked like. And it was just so bright around her face. And I was like, whoo, it literally was like this walking sunshine. And I just,
Wow.
it was almost like she had like sunshine, like shining on her skin. And I just walked up and started telling her all the cool things that I got like for Christmas and like all like I just I was like, and I got this happy go-kart and like you're never gonna believe. And she was just kind of looking at me like, oh, okay, sweetie, patting me on the head because she had never even talked to me before. And I just ran up and was like, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
But then I remember one time uh someone came in to change out like the because we still had those old school chalkboards, the pink ones. I mean, the pink, the green
Green.
ones with the wood trim and everything. And um, he had come to like change out part of the chalkboard or something. And boy, when he walked in, and I remember he was carrying, and again, I do not remember what his face looked like. And that's something that's interesting. Is it's almost like it's not important, I guess.
Right.
And so it's I always wondered to myself, was that part of me honing in on what was important? And that's why I don't remember their face, or because I couldn't tell you who these people were, you know.
Right.
But unless I saw that aura again, and then I'd be like, ooh, you know. But this guy, I don't know. He walked in, and I remember he was carrying like the materials under his arm, and he had mumbled something like, "It's this one" or something, you know. And we're doing our little activity, and she's like, "Yes, yes," you know. And we go to carry on. I could not quit shaking, like, you know, when you're like trying to hold in, like almost when you're cold and you
Yeah.
shiver, like that kind of scared, like you're tensed up, so it's like real like tense vibration, like
Mm.
shaking. And I was just sitting in my little chair, like could not stop the shaking, and I couldn't quit looking at him because I didn't want to lose track of where he was.
Yeah.
Like I knew he was just some dude there to change chalkboard out. I was a smart enough kid, but I don't know why I saw that, but I saw it and I felt it and it freaked me out. And I was like, oh, you know,
It's almost like a
but
type of discernment. Yeah.
oh, for sure. And I couldn't tell you why or what it was or, oh, yeah, he's a bad person or anything. All I knew is that was my sign to stay away. And throughout life, I've uh, sometimes seen it and sometimes not. And still to this day, I've, and I had a friend pass away recently uh, that I haven't seen since in like 20 years because he was from Pakistan, and he, when we became friends in college, was on a visa because he was in college. And then he had taken all the jobs he could take and worked through everything he had done and run out of options. Like he couldn't keep going to school. The guy just kept getting degrees and getting
Right.
degrees. And he was running out of time. And so he ended up going back home to Pakistan, and he never married or anything like that. But he was the kindest, sweetest person. And the reason I became friends with him was because I actually saw an aura around him. And it was the first time I had seen one in a long time. I don't know the gap because it's not like I track it because it just happens or doesn't. I don't think about it.
Right.
Um, but he ended up being such a good, close friend. And then I found out recently that he was type 1 diabetic the entire time, and no one knew because he was so healthy and fit and took care of himself and like never put an energy drink or anything foul in his body. Like he was just, you just
Right.
would have never known. And apparently he had had transplants and everything that we just
Wow.
didn't know about. And
Yeah.
it was weird because it's not that I hadn't ever thought about him, because you know how it is when you don't see someone like that for like so many years. Every once in a while, it's either something or random, but they'll pop up. But it's not like I had recently had him on my mind. But I was because this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, is that I've had experiences where it's like, I know that someone is with me, and sometimes I figure out who it is. Sometimes I know right away, or sometimes it's like I can describe the feeling of like what this person was giving me, but I don't know who it is exactly. But I knew it was him, and I didn't know he had passed, so I was sad. It was almost like, because I felt, and that was the first time that's ever happened to me, where I felt that energy of someone, and I knew it was like, I'm just gonna say their passing energy, because I don't know what to call it. Like, it wasn't like, "Oh my god, I'm just thinking about my friend." It was, "He's here. How could he be here unless he died? You died?" Kind of all went through my head, like, really
Wow.
fast. And I don't know how to explain that I had a conversation with my friend, because I didn't have a conversation with my friend with words. It was kind of almost like telepathic, like all of these memories, explanations, reasons, things I wanted to say. Oh, I should have said that. I should have, things that I was joyful about, that I would, you remember that? And it was all happening at the same time. And I like had my peaceful moment with it. I cried it out. Like, and I say I cried it out with him because I felt like he sat there with me while I cried. It was just so real and so intense. But again, no one had told me. And then when a friend from that small group those many years ago popped up on one of my social media pages, that I got a message from them, I knew, because I hadn't talked to him in so long. So I knew it was that. And it was. He was like, I just wanted to let you know that, our friend passed, and he was in his bed at home with his family, and they think that it's just because the last transplant didn't take. And, apparently he had been struggling with all of this and everything. And it was just like, I wanted to be able to like talk to someone about what I had experienced,
Yeah.
because it was so intense and so real and just so there. There was no question about it. It
Well,
was like,
how do you think that happens?
I don't know.
I don't
I
either.
think I, I don't know, man. I think it just goes back to being open to it. And maybe if I were, even though I've always mentally been open to it, like if I'm not in a place where I'm working on myself and focused on certain things in that area, things that intense just don't happen as much.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was just lucky for me that I had been focused on God again in my life and been really working on my spirituality and my growth, that I was doing that during the time when he passed. So maybe that opened the door for him to be able to do that. I don't know. I just know,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. That's so interesting. That's one of those mysteries. Like I've had several people tell me similar, not quite as intense, but like this knowing, or they get a visit from someone who had just passed, and I know 99% of the time, myself included, people believe that that's not really grandma coming to visit. That's some kind of demonic spirit trying to come in and coerce you. But then there's experiences like yours
Mhm.
where there's nothing bad going on. There's no
Right.
malintent in that. There's no coercion. It's just
Even
like
if something bad disguised itself as that friend and had access to all those, what would it gain from that? Because
right,
all it did for me was encourage my spirituality. All it did for me was, okay,
right,
well, that was real as real gets. So I don't care, if I never got to share this experience with you, or if I didn't have a husband who's open minded to talk to and share it with, because I did. Like, after I had processed it, because I had to carry it around, like, not questioning did it happen. Just, I mean, I was kind of almost going back to, it was cool that you kept all that from your wife about what you were doing with your book, because I'm sure the feeling was much more intense when she found everything out all at once. That's kind of how I felt. So it wasn't, oh, I got to carry this around to figure out, is it real? I knew it was real. I had to carry it around because I was processing how real it was. I was
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Yeah, that's wild, and I wish I knew how it worked. But that's just one of them things. I think sometimes God allows it. I don't know, but it's a beautiful thing, and I thank you for sharing that with me, because that's a very personal thing for you. But I'm getting chill bumps. That's just it's beautiful. So thank you
For
for that.
sure. No, and I actually said that to my friend, Um, I kind of laughed because, again, it's my friend, so it's not like, yeah, was I processing the sadness of his passing? Yeah, but like I was sitting there and happy and having this like comfort, because again, all this stuff happened at the same time. So it was almost like I got to go through my grieving and sit there and do the whys and no's and the anger and cry. But I also had all the circling back to the good things and the memories, and I'm good, and like I'm trust me, like I'm happy to be out of that, like, body. I'm good. And like somehow, I don't know how, but he was, even though I didn't physically see him, he made it clear to me that he was taller. But yeah, but then that same kind of experience I've had with, um, so on two other situations, but not as intense as that. Like, but the same kind of like, I feel that someone's here. In one instance, I knew, like in his instance, I knew who it was, and I immediately knew, like, oh, no way, because if you're here, that means you passed, and it all made sense right away. And we just went straight into the, let's get into the conversation and settle this. Don't be sad, it is what it is, kind of thing. But in this other instance, so I had a really, dude, and I think honestly, I had mentioned the, like, I've never had a broken bone, and some people say that that's because God knew you needed extra protection. And it's so, I hear so many of your guests say, like, we don't even have time to go down the rabbit hole and like try to like give all the details. But my life was definitely one of those, and I know I'm not alone in this. It was one of those lives to that could, some people say you could write a book, some people say it could be a Lifetime movie, whatever.
Do it.
There was never a dull moment, and some of it was very intense, and I think because I was born into, and until I was old enough and able to get myself out of those situations, protected, and just I have a really, I guess I give people, one of the things I've learned, is obviously setting healthy boundaries. I had to learn that because I just, that wasn't a thing in my,
Yeah.
the way I grew up. And also, like, giving people grace has never been a problem, because I've always just felt naturally that I was a patient, calm, like kind, like chill. Just, that was just, it's just been my demeanor. It's who God made me, whatever. But I found a way somehow to like set the boundaries, give grace, but recognize real quick, like, how much and how far and how close do I stay to that situation or person. And that was the struggle before. And I think I can't give myself credit for that, because the way my mind works, I would have never figured it out, because I mean, I have, wit about me, and I have I'm good at figuring people out and all that. But because I think about all these things, dude, and I'm so open to so many things, my brain is all over the place. And if like my spirit self, I feel like, is the part of me that like brings me down, like take a breath.
Yeah.
Let's take all this information that you have, and let's make it make sense. And I think I spent a lot of my years in that jumbled up cloud of, I lived in chaos. And anytime that, and I was born in it, I was in it for most of my life. And so when peace came, I didn't know how to function. So I think that's why it took me so long to get into the point in my life where I dove into my spirituality. Like it was always a part of me and
Man.
I always cared about it. But as I was growing up and going through college and like experiencing different cultures and religions, um, I've been to, though it's very westernized, to Morocco because I had a lot of friends from there in college. And because in Oklahoma, it was very inexpensive compared to other states to go to school. So a lot of foreigners would come to Oklahoma to go to school. So I ended up meeting organically just people from all different walks of life. And so, it introduced me to different religions and just like I traveled to go to some of these places. Like I really was interested and intrigued and like I learned a lot. And man, it was just wild how God always tied everything back to like, and it's like, oh my God, I haven't thought about that question that I had since I was, 6 years old in the church and like got my hand slapper at, you know what I mean? It's like, you
Yeah.
remembered that and now you're answering it and I'm turning 40. Like what?
Yeah. It's cool
It's
like that, you know.
like he's got the book of my questions. He's like, oh dang, I haven't answered this one. Let me go ahead and get that one off there. It's like, um, so because you were asking how does it happen? I don't know, dude. There's like a combination of things that I think just have to be right for us to interpret things, to see it, because I really believe everything is always going on all around us, and it's just where are we with ourselves and with God, because you know uh we'd say like use me, but like do we put in the work for him to be able to use me? That's like me walking up to an electrician like, I'll help you at work today.
All right.
It's like, what?
Amen. That's a
Have
good
you
way to
done any
put it.
of this before? Like,
That's a good
mm,
way to put it. That's a perfect way to put it.
yeah, because I'm just, so I may not do everything right, but like I said, I feel good about myself if I'm talking to God and I'm working through it, because I feel like at this point in my life that I have opened myself up enough that without a doubt, when he needs to tell me something, he does. And when I ask, he answers it. And it's gotten to, sometimes it's through other people and things and like weird stuff you can't explain. And dude, I want to tell you about this dream, because so let me make a note, because I gotta tell you about this ties into what I was starting to say, and I got off track with the like experiencing feelings of people who have passed.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I had a stepfather who, man, I don't even know. Sometimes I feel bad trying to describe him because um, he was one of those like, he said he was a godly man and he was a very intelligent dude and he read the Bible all the time, forward, backwards, and he had a freaking uh, uh, photographic memory. Like when he would help me study for tests, he would look at the question answer sheet and put it down, and then out of order, he could ask me the questions and know the answer. And so he knew the Bible like very well because he loved, it was intriguing to him because he had that memory.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And the problem is, I think he had a lot of demons. I'm just going to, again, loosely say demons and attached to him. And he had a weird upbringing. I don't know all the details of it, but I know that his mother and father were two people that I saw auras on when I was young. And his mother was a very dark aura, and his father was a very, very beautiful, welcoming, loving, safe aura. And his father unfortunately passed away before my stepdad did. Cancer ran rapid in my stepdad's family. All his uncles were dying of it. His brothers were dying of it. And then he got diagnosed with it when I was 8 years old. And so I ended up caring for, like, learning how, that's kind of why I got into the medical field, because I was helping my mom like care for him on again and off again for like 16 plus years. But the caveat to that is that he was this godly man. He was also abusive in many ways to me.
Sorry.
And it was a wild situation because that's something that, again, I go back to when you're young and you can't get out of something because it's just not in your control. I know a lot of people have a hard time grasping, like, well, if there's a God, they wouldn't put you in these situations.
Right.
No, man, like God gave us the freedom to choose. And unfortunately, my parents chose certain things that put me in that situation. Like my earthly parents put me in that situation. My God
Yeah.
didn't. He actually saw that I was in that, knew I was going to be in it. And I feel like he prepped me before birth, like whatever, because dude, some people say like, oh, you choose your parents, and my husband's always like, well, I don't know if that's true because I don't know who would choose them. And I'm like, someone who needs to have a spiritual like understanding, because if I didn't go through all of that, I would be like a lot of people, I feel like, who walk this earth and never even experience a spiritual experience, or even
Right.
experience any kind of godly experience, or even experience, like, I know he tries surely, but you know what I mean. um so I don't know, I feel like God has given me a peace and always given me that like understanding about just not carrying resentment, because I think resentment is a demon. Like, I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think anger and carrying, like, not being able to forgive people, like, that's a demon. And you can be a really good person and not understand why things are going so bad and not even realize, well, you wouldn't think about, well, I didn't forgive my stepdad for abusing me, like, as the reason why, you know what I mean? But it could have been. And I don't know why or how. I couldn't even tell you like an aha moment or a lesson. Sorry, that's the automatic cat feeder.
All right.
It's weird because it's my voice on it. So I'm like whistling for the fatties in there. Um, but I think that that's the reason why I've been open to these things, is because from a very young age, even though I did get plopped into this horrible, like, my mom and I, like, because I was with her and she was a single mom, like, she was homeless at times. We lived in women's shelters in a car, like, but then where there were times, that house on the hill I told you about, the Kavanaugh Hill, my stepdad provided that. And that was the best living situation I ever had. And I like, found ways to uh get through. But like, it's weird because, again, when I some of those years seem so long and stretched out, and some of them just seem like God almost gave me the favor of just speeding that shit up. Like, it really was this long, but don't worry, girl, I got you. I'm gonna make it feel like it's like this because that shit's bad. Let me just get you through. um and I think, because I always stayed open to it, again, the only time that I feel like any of this stuff dampened with me was when I wasn't out doing bad things or anything. I wasn't living a bad life, but I just wasn't in tune with my God.
Yeah.
Because anyway, so I felt this like energy one day, and it just kept happening. And I don't know how I knew, but I knew, and that it was him. He ended up, the way he died was not from his cancer. He survived the cancer so many times. He went through chemo, radiation. He started with neck and throat cancer, and they did surgery. They took his tongue. They replaced his tongue with, like, they made this flap from like skin graft. They took like muscle from his thigh and his forearm, and so he couldn't eat. He had a tube in his stomach. It's called a, now the newer ones are G tubes, but back then they were called a peg tube, and it just direct port. Uh, and so they did the flap so he could try to communicate and talk, and he could, but it sounded like if you stick a finger in your mouth and you try to talk, because he couldn't touch the roof of his mouth or anything, and he sounded like the Aflac duck, we always said. But uh he survived all of that, and he always said it was because of God. And so I know that he had a relationship with God, and I know he claimed to be a Christian and that he accepted Jesus. So I know at some point, according to him, he did, right? But then he was also this abuser. And so it's weird because it's like, again, I think he had a freaking demon on him. And like, I could see that. And so it wasn't like I was scared of this human man who was my abuser. I was so hardened from that. That didn't scare me. I was gangster when it came to that. But I was like, this darkness on him is the definition of heebie jeebies. I don't want this around me if I can help it. And I couldn't because of my, I was in a situation where he was just there for so long. And when I finally got old enough to leave and left and all of that, he would try to communicate. This was right when I finally like got into some therapy and was trying to like, because like I'd mentioned when I got into like my moment of peace, that's when everything kind of came down on me. And I was trying to figure that out because I didn't really understand it. I was like, what? I got away from all this shit that's been going on. Life is good, and like now I'm feeling more depressed, more anxious.
Yeah, of course.
Like, yeah, worse in every kind of way. And I didn't get it. And so I like put my, and I've been diagnosed bipolar, but I honestly think that, and maybe I am, whatever. I would love to see a neuropsychiatrist who hooks my brain up and diagnoses me that way.
Right.
Not just based on behavior, because I believe there's so much perception involved when it comes to explaining, I hear voices and,
Right.
like I'm not.
They don't take
Like,
into account the spiritual world.
yes, exactly. So I just felt this weird energy come over me one day, and it was weird because I was in Houston at the time, and it was just me. I was by myself, solo. I don't even remember. I think I was an insurance salesperson at the time, and I was just like tired. It was a long day, and I wanted to get some fresh air. I'm always outside when I can be, and I just sat outside with my little dog and was on the steps of this like ghetto apartment that I was in at the time, like in Houston. Like that was bad. And I was just zoning and just trying to wind down before I go in and shower and go to bed, and boom, it's like someone sat next to me on the step. And it was so intense and real that I was like leaning and looking like, who that,
Yeah.
But it was like I had this understanding. It was familiar, someone I knew. And then things started coming slowly. So it was like not like the situation with my friend where everything happened at once and it was just good and I understood it. This was like almost like this entity was having to explain things to me. That's why, like you said earlier, why does that happen? I wonder why that happens. Maybe just God allows it. I truly believe it because it's like the situations were different, and I can, if you just simplify it, it's almost like, yeah, friend, you go see your friend and let her know what you need to let her know. But this dude, that's my baby. Like that's my child. So all right, you got to settle some business or whatever. She's protected, take it easy, do your thing. I don't know, but it just felt like that. You know what I mean? These things were slowly coming to me, and I was like, but wait. And with him, it was different because I didn't have the immediate, oh my God, you're dead. If you're here, then that means you're dead. I was like slowly figuring it out, but I don't know how to explain it. There was an overlap of the information coming to me and the feelings and processing it. And then like my brain being like, oh, that's that, as other information was still flowing in, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So it was like this input and output kind of while I was sitting there. And that's when I had the realization, wait a minute, if it's no, and I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that he was dead because he had been reaching out to me.
Yeah.
And he had been reaching out to me via email because my therapist had recommended that I set healthy boundaries between him and even my mother at the time, because she's in a good place now. but she's been a struggling alcoholic, and she's
Right.
always been a very faithful person. So that definitely got her through. But like, she had her own stuff. So I really wasn't talking to either one of them. And I had made it clear to them why. It wasn't just like, oh, I cut them off, we were on bad terms or anything. It was like, hey, I'm going to therapy and I love you. And if you have an emergency, let me know. But I got to set some boundaries right now and focus on myself. And I can't do it with all this outside noise. For the most part, they respected it. But this dude would still find weird ways to get in my head. And so I thought, no, he's not dead. He just emailed me. We used to always call each other nerd. And so all he emailed me was nerd.
Right.
And I wanted to respond nerd because it's so simple. You can at least say nerd. You always say nerd back. You know, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, don't. I don't know why. My spirit was like, don't. And I just, for some reason, felt like whatever it was that was attached to him that he couldn't get rid of. Because even though he knew all these scriptures, he knew the Bible forward and backwards. So I never could figure that out. Like, why couldn't he get rid of this darkness if he knows the Bible like better than most people who have studied it their whole lives based on just his memory, like
Right.
being so impeccable? Like, that should be so powerful. But I didn't understand when I was younger why he couldn't use that. Now I know it's because you did know the word of God. The devil knows the word of God. I'm not saying he was the devil. I feel like he wanted to be a godly person and wanted to be a good person.
Yeah.
Or he wouldn't have accepted Christ in the first place. But he never defeated those demons, and God couldn't work through him, I don't think, because of it. Like, I don't know. But so that's why it was this creepy kind of like creepy, but not creepy, which is honestly the feeling I got with him in real life. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So his niece ended up calling me and saying, well, they found him, in his parents' home is where he was living in the end in Oklahoma City, in his recliner in the living room, like he had been watching TV. We'll let you know when we find something out. The toxology report came back and he had swallowed a bunch of his like medication. So I don't know. It was just the same thing, but so different. And I really don't know how to explain that. I felt like it was almost like God was standing right there, like supervising the entire thing. Like, I knew I felt protected, but like I still don't know why he needs to be around or why he needs to even communicate with me, because that never came across. It was just, it took that much energy and effort to even explain who he was.
Yeah.
And so that leads me to, and I was freaking out, like, I have to tell you about this dream. I don't know what your belief is on dreams, or if you're like me, where you're open to a lot of things and like theories or scenarios on dreams. But I had this intense dream, and when I explain this dream to you, just promise to like hang with me, because it's gonna sound like a horror flick at first, okay? Because that's what it seemed like. But like, it circles back to me having, and this just happened, which makes me feel like there's a reason why we had to reschedule the first time, because I wouldn't have had this to talk about.
Okay.
This was like the most clear, like, when I told my husband, like, I feel like I have a good open communication with God, and that like communication happens in different ways for different people. And for me, it happens in different ways all of the time. It's not always the same way. But this was the most clear, direct. I asked a question, and it almost like before I even asked the question in my mind, the only thing missing was a voice, I guess, is the best way to put it. Like, I didn't hear an actual voice, but I heard word for word, like what I heard. I don't know how that happens, but so stick with me for the dream part.
I'm with you.
I had this, and I haven't had, by the way, like nightmares in a long time because I rebuked that shit. I literally even have dreams where in my dream I'm trying to rebuke something in the name of Jesus and I can't speak, or my mouth won't move, or it's so shut, or just not there anything so that I can't say the name Jesus. And I will have dreams. That's the only way I can wake up, is somehow getting myself in the dream to be able to say the name Jesus, which has always made me feel like obviously we don't completely understand dreams because something was happening that was real life.
Absolutely.
That I had to call in my, like, being asleep and whatever consciousness I was in, I knew I had to call upon Jesus or like it was bad. And so this dream, I haven't had nightmares in a long time, and I've been not getting good sleep and having like, that started off like short blips of just like bad things, like, oh my gosh, I saw this and that was bad, and I woke up and I had that nasty feeling in my stomach, and I don't like that, and then you shake it off and you move on, and they were getting a little bit longer and a little bit longer. Well, and that's always another weird thing to me too. When you have like a continuation of a dream, when you have a dream and then like days later it continues, like,
Yeah.
how does that even happen? So this dream was very specific and it was very odd because you know how they talk about like, and they've even been coming out, like I mentioned, I read all these scientific articles and stuff, and they've been talking a lot lately about how scientists are actually working actively right now on communicating with other dimensions, and they actually kind of basically came out and said that they have already.
Yeah.
And all of that, and there's astral projection and just all these different things that could be relevant to dreams. And with all of that in mind, it makes this very interesting. So it was like this dream was a very normal dream, like things were just happening, but it was like my mom was my mom, my stepdad was my stepdad, like things were the same but different. Like I knew I was at home with them and there was a situation going on, but it wasn't the same. The house looked different. Like it was like all of us, we were still the same family members and everything, but in a totally different life. Like, okay, so it was almost like I was just watching the dream, or I was there in real life, because it felt more like I was there in real life, but I just couldn't interact with myself or anyone else. And so I'm in this dream, I'm having a conversation. I walk into the door, and I guess I like lived with my mom or I went to see my mom. I don't know, but I opened my old like childhood home, open the front door. My mom is pacing back and forth, sweating, looking all gross and like just flustered, like freaking out. Okay. And there's a gentleman there that I don't know. And I'm like, that's not unusual. So I'm like, what? Hello? Like, hi, who are you? And what's going on? And mom, why are you so upset? Like, again, just normal, because I didn't feel like I was in a dream. It was just like I was watching a movie in my life or something. But I was like, oh, that's weird. My house didn't quite look like that. Like I was thinking things as I'm watching it.
Yeah.
Okay. So my mom's all flustered and everything. Long story short, in this dream, I guess because my dad and her in my real life had talked about if it ever got really bad, would you consider going to one of the states where you can do like assisted suicide, like, because he had battled with this cancer for so many years. And it wasn't anything they seriously considered or even like took action on. It was just something that had come up before. And so in this dream, it was kind of like tied into that, where it was like my mom was like freaking out because apparently she had tried. They had discussed it. He had asked her to help her in some way. She hadn't given me the details of how, but it went wrong. And according to her, it went horribly wrong. And now she's freaking out because she didn't know what to do. And he wouldn't allow her to call for help. And she called this friend to come over and help her finish it. And that went awful. And so as she's trying to explain this, the guy opens the door and I see clear as day. And that's where it was like real graphic. But it was like my stepfather laying on the ground, still alive, but like barely, and like just blood coming from his mouth and like real graphic. And I'm like, well, what did you even try to do? You know, and I'm trying to figure out like what's going on. And then it like fast forwards. And so it's like, um, I know that that's like years past without any more detail. Like it didn't give me any more. Okay.
Right.
And then I'm in the same house, but now I have my son, like my real life son. And I will point out, because this is important for later, this is one of the things God told me that I'm going to get to. I've never had a dream about my son ever. He's 5, and he's never been in any of my dreams until the other day. So I am talking to my mother upstairs. We're having just a normal conversation about something. She's irritating me and taking my attention away. And I keep glancing over, looking down these stairs at my son, who's sitting in front of a folding mirror playing with something. And I don't know why I wanted to know what he was playing with so bad, but I don't know if it never showed it. I don't know if I just can't remember the details. I don't know what he was playing with, but for some reason that was so important to me. But I kept looking and he's playing, and she's like, he's fine. Listen to me. He's playing. He's fine. And she kept saying, he's fine. Listen to me. Like, don't, and that stuck out to me. And I was kind of getting this feeling like in the dream, all of a sudden, like, that's not my mom.
Right.
And so I look down the stairs and he's laying down now, like he's asleep. And I get this awful feeling. So I run down the stairs to check him. And she's like, no, you don't need to check him. You don't need to check him. Oh, trust me, he's fine. So I run down the stairs, and as I go to touch him to make sure he's breathing, this is where it's weird, because it turned out of nowhere, took a left turn. He rolls over and he suddenly turned into a real life, full-fledged, like I was in the face of a tiger, like a full-grown, like if I've never actually seen a tiger outside of a zoo in real life, like up close. But in my dream, I literally was not terrified. Like I thought it was going to hurt me because I knew it wasn't. But like, whoa, its tooth was like the size of the side of my face. And it was like breathing. And then I touched it and it like rolled over like a house cat and like was letting me rub its belly and stuff. And I woke up. So I called my husband, who's at work, and I'm like, dude, I just had the freaking, remember, I haven't been sleeping and I've been having this awful dream. It was like, he was like, yeah, I don't want you to have a bad day, because you can't shake that feeling. I'm like, I just came home from work, had a doctor's appointment. I had to pick my son up early that day, go to a doctor's appointment. I had a rough day. Our son is autistic, and so he's great, but sometimes he's just being a typical 5-year-old brat, and sometimes he's being an autistic brat, and that's a lot to deal with. And so I was tired, and I was like, I'm going to lay down and take a short nap. And I remember I set my alarm for 30 minutes. And so I had this dream in the 30 minutes. And I woke up and I called my husband, and I was like, this is so weird. As I'm telling him the dream, I'm asking myself these questions. And he's like, dude, that's interesting. Like, we need to talk about it more later. And I ended up calling him back because right when I hung up, literally, like I said, the questions that I was asking myself, it was like God just, bam, answered them. And it's so weird. So here's what I asked and here's what he told me. And it's so interesting to me. I was like, first of all, why have I never dreamt about him before? Like, why did I just now dream about him for the first time ever? I had never even thought about that. He's 5 years old. And when I dream about my brother, who's 5 years younger than me, he's always a kid. I've never had a dream about my brother as an adult. He's always a kid. So that's interesting too. But I had never had a dream period with my son in it. Yeah. And right when I thought that question, it was like I said, the only thing missing was a voice. Because you didn't have him in that life yet. So if you had dreamt about him, he would have been a stranger to you in this life. So the significance of you dreaming this dream that I gave you about your son wouldn't have been the same. And And I was like, he didn't exist in that life yet. And it made me start thinking about how they're saying now, like time literally, if it goes on for infinity, 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 it's like there's folds. And so eventually you can run into another version of yourself. And now they say, like, you may have already found another version of yourself. And there's only so many ways you can communicate with that version of yourself. So there's all these weird things going on in my mind. And I was like, was I literally like, did I like astral project, or like, did I see my life in another dimension?
Right.
Was I literally witnessing my life in another dimension? And like, that's how crazy that life is right now. And I was just witness to it. And then I've had this like, not fear, because I have really strong faith, but like one of the things that I pray constantly anytime, when you have children, is like for protection over them.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
I don't know why I've always had the urge to say, and my husband knows because I say it about him too, and everyone. When I pray, I'm like, oh, I even say it to my 5-year-old when he's going to bed, and he'll repeat it back to me at night, like, you're protected every day, in every way, everywhere. And I always say, this life, the next life, and all the lives. And I've just always said it without even like intent or like. And then eventually, as I started learning about things, and especially when like science is coming out and saying, hey, like, we've actually, for the first time, put two people to sleep and they communicated with each other in their dreams.
Right.
Like, we've astro projected, and we're jumping through time, and like all these things. I was like, holy crap, did I just dream a dream? Or did God need to tell me that, like, because the next question was, why is the tiger? Like,
Yeah.
why the back and forth? And before I could even finish, yes, you are a child of Christ. There are demons that want your son. There are, because that's what's important to you. But he is protected. And by the way, he's not just protected in your life. You've prayed for protection over him in Jesus' name in all of the lives, all of the time, everywhere. So I just needed to show you protected him there. Like,
Wow.
so, whether you believe it's real or not, it's like why? Like, why otherwise, And just to
Right.
hear something so clear as day. Like, I called my husband back. Oh my gosh. He answered me. What? I was like, he answered me. And I was like, how I always say this? And he's like, dude, that's wild. And my husband's like really open to a lot of this, but he's, again, not always been like as in tune and doesn't experience as many things, but he appreciates it. And he appreciated that about his grandmother. His mother's kind of similar.
Yeah.
And so we do talk about these things a lot. And he was like, it's kind of crazy because he's been working also on himself a lot, like just being more open, not giving into anxiety and letting that take over, and like not asking why all the time, and letting God show you. Like, and one of the biggest lessons I think that I've been able to help him see is that God has a really weird way with timing. Like, again, about the podcast, like with you, like I having to reschedule the first one, like this just happened to me like 2 days ago. It was the middle of the day. Um,
That is interesting. Like, you were looking in through. Do you remember when you were little? Did you ever read one of those Which Way books?
mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
you read, and it's like, to open the door on the left, turn to this page. Open the door on the
Yeah.
right, you turn to that page.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're looking into one of the other options. Like, had you not left home or
Yeah.
whatever, right on the right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's
That's what
like,
I. That's crazy you said that, because that's what I said to my husband. Because it's like when something just happens, you're kind of like talking it out, feeling it out, and like exploring what it could be and all that, and like have some realizations. But there's just so many things that would make sense. And if you took that's weird out of it, or that's not possible out of it, and you were just like, yeah, that would make sense, because like I said, I had that feeling that I was that it wasn't like I was dreaming, and I was talking to myself in it and everything kind of like, oh wow, I just ended up here. Like, well, interesting. And then like, wait, the house wasn't like that. But then things started getting so intense and I wanted to be involved and do something. I wanted to like intervene and stop it. And like it was so real and so then it was like when I woke up and I thought, well, if that is a possibility, like, holy cow. I was like, yes, it made me pray even harder for, because I'm like, if that's what baby's going through, like, sheesh.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
who knows? I just know why not lean on well, I'm going to keep praying then, because to me, the message was it does matter and your prayer does work and
Yes, it
keep
does.
doing it. And that there are things that want your son, like, and that's just, again, going back to that, like when I feel like I'm kind of, like tight with, and I'm good and I'm in tune with them, then things are just easier. You know what I mean? It's like if you haven't talked to a friend in a while
Yeah.
and then something serious comes up, it might be a little more awkward versus if you've been talking every day and vibing and jiving, you know what's going on in each other's lives and you're in tune, then something coming up is just a quick, hey dude, like da 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 da, this is happening. We got to do this. It's not, oh, I got to get through. I know I haven't talked to you in a while and like, let me explain what's happening. You know what I'm saying? There's
It's
a
a good
quicker,
relationship. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a quicker resolve. And so I almost feel that was one of the things that was weighing on me that I was walking around carrying with me. And he was like, okay, let me just squash that. Like, it's going to suck to see, but yeah, that's real and it happens. But the good news is your prayer is powerful and it works.
Amen. Amen.
But
Yes, it is. That's a very intense dream.
it's
That's
so intense and it's had me so, like, as people say, shooketh. Like, I've just been like, oh man. And, um, but I wanted to be able to at least, and there's so many weird things and like, I don't know if it's just that it's like God will show you things in a way that you will be able to comprehend and understand. Because some of the stuff that I saw when I was young is goofy if I think about it now. But in the time, in the moment, like visually the way I saw it, like,
yeah.
again, I'm not talking poorly on my mother, but she had already been married like 4 times by the time I was 8. And so we moved around a lot and there were a lot of different people in and out of our lives. And so going back to that being protected and always feeling like I've had that protection over me.
Amen.
And also just like the spirit spoke to me a lot, I think, because it's like training me up. Like, I got to train you up to get through life. Like, and it doesn't just all happen. My husband always says, I wish that I had your patience and I wish that I could just get through things and like, you don't overreact. And if something happens, like sometimes it's actually misinterpreted when we first started dating, as like, do you not care about things as much as I do? And it's like, no, when you have gone through really intense things over and over and it just becomes a part of life. I don't say that to gain like sympathy. I'm saying it makes you really be able to determine how much of your energy you need to invest in like being upset about something and how quickly you want to just resolve it.
Yeah.
And but it takes practice and effort. You can't just like wake up and like have patience. Like you really unless you're just blessed with patience, like you really have to practice patience if that's something you want.
Yeah.
You got to tell yourself to like take a beat. Like I always tell, I'm like, start small, dude. Like literally count in your head to like pick a number, count to 7. Count to 7 before you respond to someone.
Yeah.
Give yourself time to think, because like God will tell you, your Holy Spirit will tell you, but you got to shut up long enough for it to.
That's it. That's the other half of praying is listening.
Yeah.
You got to listen for his response, because we ask and we ask and we beg and we plead and we lay it out. And then that's all right. All right. In Jesus' name, amen. And we go to sleep.
Yeah.
we need to take the time to be available,
Like,
for
if you played that out in, like, a skit, it would be laughable because it's like God sitting there, or your friend even, if it was just your friend and you're like, "Yeah, and I need da 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 da, and this happened, and blah blah blah, and thank you for that, but I really could use this and blah blah. Okay, thank you, bye." And they're still just sitting there, and you roll over and go to sleep, and they're like, "Well, oh, I had stuff to say."
yeah,
Like,
I'll talk to you
or
tomorrow, I guess.
or you asked like 5 different questions. I actually have the answer. You want me to tell you, or are you just gonna check, are we done? You peacing out? Like,
That's it. You
yeah,
said something at the very beginning. You were talking about how you're reconnecting with, you said, I think, your childhood, but from like the perspective you have now. And I think that's a beautiful way to approach our walk with Jesus, because he says to come to him as a child, and it's just like that blind faith, like when we're kids, we say, or like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist, and then I
yeah,
wanted to be a veterinarian. And there was just no doubt in my mind that was going to happen.
you were gonna do it.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's the kind of faith and just expectation he wants us to approach him with. You know what I mean? And I just think you have a beautiful outlook. It's just, it's something to be admired. Like you just take it for what it is and you accept it and you don't try to put it in a box. It's just, wow, God, that's awesome. And I'll wait for you to explain it to me.
Yeah,
I think you do have that approach. I think you got it. I think you got a handle on this. And some
I
of the stuff,
appreciate it. Yeah, that's
yeah, it might come off wild, or some people might not understand it, but it's just a matter of accepting it. You know,
yeah.
I think it's
And
great.
I keep everything pretty, because again, that's part of like everybody's personality is molding, but a lot of it is instilled in them based on obviously their childhood experiences and stuff. And it could be things that you wouldn't even think about, that track back to, well, it's because she was always dealing with this, and so that's why she's like this, or whatever. And so and some of those things, it's like you can recognize as an adult, or if your life has changed and that's no longer the scenario, you can make adjustments. Like if it is something that you picked up that you don't consider a strength, you know like me not opening up to people all the time. Like it took a long time to find a good healthy balance, because I'm really good at opening up on the surface level. I can get along and chat with people and be charismatic and have fun, and like, because I read people's energies and stuff pretty well, like will pick my people to like interact with in social settings. But it's always surface level stuff. It's not, and I could go on and on with surface level stuff. I've got, so many hillbilly stories and
Right.
hilarious stuff. And I'm one of those people that I have to train myself not to jump in and share a story when someone tells me a story, because I'm not trying to compete or be like, oh yeah, well I had that, but I love connecting with people. So like if I think of something that I'm like, dude, I have something that relates to that too, that's where the intent's coming from. But it'll come off sometimes as like, well, I got to share something about myself. And so I've learned to just really let people talk about themselves a lot, which is why it's awkward for me doing this, because most of the time people are just rambling about themselves and give your feedback so here and there. But so that's weird. But it's just it's fun to share it, because again, you talk to so many people who go through so many different but same experiences. And I liked the fact, I think, that there are lots of really cool alien podcasts and lots of really cool like scientific podcasts and lots of really cool spiritual podcasts and like religious podcasts and whatever. And it was just interest. That's why I was like, I will talk to him, because like I don't really find people that I can talk to about like all these weird things,
Yeah.
but then tie it back to God and Christ the way I could, talking to you, because I always find myself like wanting to, like, even if I talk to someone that's open and into things, if they're not necessarily godly or then that's where they stop it. Even if they're respectful, like, yeah, well, you can believe that about it, but I don't. But it's like when you do, and then and just how incredible it is to tie all this stuff back to scripture, and just like how incredible it is to like, because I mean, with how clear those answers were after those dreams, like, to me there is no other explanation but God. Like, there's just, I'm sorry, because I know it just sounds like, okay, whatever, you had this thought and it's just your thoughts and you're just saying this was, no, dude, I literally was sitting there thinking a question and bam, it was like, here's your answer. And I'm like, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of it. I didn't just teach myself something. Like, uh,
Yeah, it's
I
like a
mean,
revelation.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, like flabbergasted. I was like, and it was so real and so like significant that, like I said, I called my husband and back to back at work, like, because first it was just, let me tell you about the dream. And then it was like, oh, but that's really cool. But yeah, so like he was saying that I told you he's been working on himself, and he was at work and he was like, it's crazy because that you say that, because I had mentioned like, well, I think it's because I've really been focused again lately on like meditating and talking to God and my prayer, just all these things, and making it, a normal part of my daily life again all the time. Like, and so I think that's why I got the answer, because I did have this little deep rooted fear of, God, I just don't ever want anything to happen to my son. And I have strong enough faith that I tell myself every day, you know what? No, that fear is there, but nothing is like God's plan is God's plan for him. He's protected. Whatever that plan is, he's protected in Jesus' name. And so it was almost like, hey, yeah, you thought you had that feeling for some reason. It's true.
Yeah.
Like these bad, they want him. But guess what? Like, you're doing the right thing. And I just don't see any other, like, that's just, to me, it's God. It's like, hey, yo, like, I asked, he answered, and that settled it for me. Like, I don't have to worry about that part of my life. You know
There
what I
you go.
mean?
There you go. You got your peace, you
Hmm.
got your peace. And about protection and guardian angels, um, a lot of people may not recognize it or want to accept it, but we flat out have guardian angels, and that's outlined in the Bible too.
Hmm.
If you go to Psalm 91, verse 11, it says, He will charge
Hmm.
His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. So He has specific angels for you for your protection. Um, so yeah, tell Him, God, I need you to send those guys that are that are over my
Well,
baby.
and then when you experience something like that, then
Yeah,
all the other stuff, like back to the RH negative stuff and like the alien stuff and the whatever, you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like even if I can't find it right now, it makes me just feel like, oh, there's an answer to it in there somewhere.
I'm sure.
And it makes sense. Like, sometimes it's crazy how like the most minute detail can just make the bigger picture make sense all of a sudden. It's
Yeah,
like, just without that one little thing, it was so impossible and confusing, and like there's either a million scenarios or theories or whatever, or there's nothing, and then all of a sudden this detail is there and it's like, and so yeah, it's dude, oh, I keep forgetting that I get off track with the husband thing. So he was saying God has started slowly showing him more things, like, because he's been working on himself and opening himself up to focus on the right things and not like his anxieties and stuff. And we are on the same page with like our son and his autism and everything, but I guess I have the comfortability of my faith. So he's very positive and couldn't be a better father or anything.
Amen.
But I'm just saying that, like, having that strong faith that you've always worked on and you're not just now starting to work on, there's just such a significant difference when it comes to eliminating worry. And him automatically being an anxious person,
Right.
it's easier for him and more comfortable for him to just allow himself to cycle through those worries. And I have been trying to explain to him, yeah, but you know what? Even if you're not going to like buckle up in other areas in your life when it comes to our son, you better figure out how not to worry, because you sitting around and worrying and worrying and worrying is manifestation, because you're at least believing that those bad things you're worried about are a possibility. And to me, if faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of the unseen, and I'm automatically telling myself, okay, he is protected. I don't know how, but God is going to protect him in the name of Jesus. He's good. Then I can't sit around. You can't stop the thoughts from popping in your head if it's coming from wherever, but you can immediately be like, I said no.
Amen.
Like, good try. Back off. like
You're right.
like
You're
it's
right.
not happening, and get out of my head. And that's when, like, I'm like, I know God forgives me, because that's when I start getting a potty mouth, because I'm like backed up when it comes to my kid and I feel it and it's like getting in. I'm like, I said no,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to say sorry because I'm like cursing and praying in the name of Jesus at the same time. But he had several people walk up to him recently that he knew either and hadn't seen in years or whatever. One of them was a someone at work, that works in the same industry but in a different area, and so they were in the area and he hadn't seen them in a long time. They were talking and chatting, and it was like, "How's your kids doing?" and blah blah blah. Oh, by the way, she says to him, "I never mentioned to you. My brother is autistic, and he's in his 30s, and he has his own apartment, has a job. He's
Yeah.
not social like your son, but he does this, he does that." A few hours go by, and our neighbor, we have a group text with a couple different neighbors, and she's like, "Hey, do you watch Survivor?" And I was like, I've never watched Survivor, and everyone's always talking about Survivor, and maybe I should binge Survivor.
I
And
used to love that show. Yeah.
she was like, "Well, man, there's a young lady on this most recent episode who went through this challenge, and man, you just wouldn't know. But yeah, she ended up sharing her story, and she's autistic. And after she won a challenge that she didn't think she couldn't contain her emotions physically and stuff. And the only person there who knew she was autistic came over to comfort her and just hold her and squeeze her like autistic people do. Love, like when my son's having a tantrum, I can tell the difference between him being a jerk and like having an autistic like outburst. And so
Yeah.
one of the best things you can do is not even try to just hold him. And so he went over and just held her, and she came down from it and she shared her story and was like, "I'm autistic." And anyway, so my neighbor randomly shares this with him, and like all these things in that day,
Yeah.
and he goes, "Wait a minute, maybe you're right. Like, he does show me stuff and does answer stuff. I just don't pay attention." Like, and so all of this happened because of that dream and the conversation that we had. And so, it's just, that's why I don't focus on the why, because why focus on the why, dude? Like,
That's it.
like, I
That's it.
don't need to know why. You're going to tell me what you need to tell me. I'm going to realize what I need to realize. And sometimes it is crazy, the timing of stuff and how things will pop up years later or immediately. Like in this case, like it's just amazing and beautiful. Like, I mean, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, two more things on that. another Bible verse because I can't help myself. And
No,
I,
I like this. I like writing these down.
I'm gonna look at to make sure. I think it's Romans 8:29, but I'm gonna double check.
Mm-hmm.
Is that God works all things out for the good for those who love Him.
Mm.
8:28. I'm sorry, Romans 8:28. That's something I hang on to. Instead of the why, just remember that.
Yeah.
Replace why with God's going to work that out.
No,
And
that's
another
good.
thing on autism, I don't know if you've watched the show a lot to know that I'm a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have students that are on the spectrum in my class. It's an integrated classroom, and I have kids that are on the spectrum that have joined the military. Like it doesn't stop you from living a full life, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And it's and some of my favorite students, just because it's like
Their
there's no
directness and
filter, you know what I
yeah.
mean? So
Yep.
they're just genuine, and like I don't have to worry about what this guy's thinking because he's
That's
going to tell
very
me,
true. Yeah.
and I love that. So yeah, he can have a rich, full life. It's God's going to work it out,
Absolutely.
you
Oh,
know?
for sure. And I appreciate that. And it's just been cool to see because obviously I'm gonna try to offer my comfort. I'm as a parent, like you
Yeah.
go through, you know, I mean, even like him getting his tonsils out tomorrow, it's like I just got done listening to a doctor on a podcast about medicine and like homeopathic stuff. And the thing is there's lots of stuff out there about homeopathic, but she left like the medical industry and the practice that she was in because she was dealing with like cancer patients and stuff like that. And when she would ask like, hey, can I incorporate more vitamin C, like she would get called into like offices and disciplined for it, and she would get YouTube pages taken down just for talking about like vitamin C and simple stuff like that. And so she was like, my gosh, this is crazy. Like, I don't understand. We have all this stuff that's available to us that will help. And I'm not being cuckoo. Like, this is,
Right.
hello, like, you have a deficient. She was like, most of us are walking around with deficiencies that could be settled, just so easily. And it would take care of so many things. And she
Mhm.
specifically mentioned the tonsils. And she was like, 90% of my patients who came to me and were told they need their tonsils out, I reversed the inflammation and they didn't need it. And that's why he is getting his tonsils taken out because they're so big
Yep.
that like they touch his uvula and like he has sleep apnea and and like he can't hardly swallow and like he gets like ear infections because of it and all this stuff. And she was like, you gargle with this and blah blah blah. And in my mind, it's just going a million miles an hour because I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could do that. I can't get him to gargle. He like with the autism and him also being the preemie, like I said, he has an aversion to mouth stuff. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, God, it's so crazy that it's that simple, but I feel like a bad mom because I can't, I'm taking him to get his tonsils taken out. And like, it's not necessary, I wish I could just like go about it the natural way. But in this situation, it's so complicated and complex. And at the end of the day, I, I am trying to do what's best for him. And so that goes back to, I'm like, I think that's where, even though I'm protected and I'm strong in my faith, like things pick up on that. And they will, they're like, finally, like I found something that she's not tough about. Like, look,
Yeah.
and whatever isn't most important to you is obviously going to be a weakness. That's why in all the comic books and all the movies and all that, it's like to get to the bad guy, find who he cares about. There's always someone, or to
Right.
get to the superhero, who does he care about? The bad guy always goes after who they care about the most. Like that's their weakness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it makes sense that that's the fear that would try to manifest itself in me, like as of late.
Yep.
And
You're good
that
at
kind
taking
of
your thoughts. You're good at taking your thoughts captive, grab a hold of that, rebuke it, send it back to where it came from. You're strong.
I appreciate it. Yeah. It's again, it's just it's all I don't know. You're gonna experience whatever you were meant to experience anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
you can either look at it like with an open mind and try to figure out the best way, the best scenario, and the best way to navigate that to get the best outcome. And obviously, if you're godly, then you're going to be wanting to be a good person too. So it's not just like get the best outcome in a selfish way, it's like
That's right.
an overall goodness to it.
That's right.
And so it's, it's what every situation is different, but it's just, mm, I feel like having that instilled in me since I was so young is what's, got me through those situations, but also prepared me for, I didn't know I would have my kid at 26 weeks. I didn't know um, I would be RH negative, and we ended up having a miscarriage because of that, because we didn't catch the next one, because you can get the shot for every pregnancy, but
Right.
you got to get the shot, and if you get pregnant before you realize it, your body kills it off. And it's like, I didn't know he would end up being diagnosed, autistic, like all of these things that I was going through when I was young, where I could have focused on why, you know. Well, this is partially for sure why. I at least know that much. I don't know that that's like the big picture and that's it, but I just know that, like, whatever. I don't know what happens exactly after this life, but I know that while I'm here right now, like, this is happening. So what am I going to do with it?
Exactly.
Like, I don't know, but all these I've had like realistic stuff happen to me, like that dream. And then when I was young, I remember seeing like a cartoon wolf on the wall of this house. I woke up in the middle of the night. I was just asleep, and right when I opened my eyes, boom. And this was in the early 90s, and the house was still those old like wood planks, like walls that
Yep.
you always would throughout the whole house. And
Yep.
so it was just, this is what's funny about it. And I was saying earlier, like, I don't know why God shows you things the way he does, but I think it's just so, however you need to see it to comprehend it or whatever. And so when I was little, it was like, uh, I guess the spirit was trying to tell me, like, hey, you're not, I know you're kind of settling in here, and that doesn't happen often, but you're not going to stay here. So, like, it's not good for you here. You don't need to be here. It seems good. Get down. It seems good, but there's something not good for you here. And I
Yeah.
never knew what that was, but I woke up in the middle of the night, and this cartoon wolf was like on the wall, like straight up just looked like an animation, like right in front of me, like projected on the wall. And I'm like, whoa. And it's just talking to me. And it had a freaking like pimp suit on, like a purple long like pimp jacket with the fur and like the hat and the walking cane and all that. And I was like, what is happening? And this thing was just talking to me. And I know it said a lot more than what I remember, but for whatever reason, the only part of the conversation that I remember was, hey girl, you're not staying here. Like, gotta, like, sorry. And I was like, but I want to stay here. And he was like, no, no. And that was the conversation. I was like, but I like it here. And he was like, yeah, but it's just not good for you. And it was real casual like that. And I was like,
Yeah.
all right, whatever. And then there ended up being like a really dramatic situation that caused us to leave. And like, I remember the night that we did leave, and it was storming outside, and as we were pulling away, and I like looked out the back window, that cartoon thing was there, and like did its like hat thing, and then was just like gone.
Uh-uh.
And that sounds goofy. It sounds
Uh,
so goofy, but it was just like, okay, cool. Like, you had to tell me something, and that's how you told me.
yeah. Yeah. I've heard that things appear to you the way you can digest it,
Yeah.
or things will appear to you and our mind processes it in something that we can wrap our head around.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's again why I was like, dude, yeah, I'll talk to you, because there's so many weird things that I just like mostly keep to myself, but I'll share with like my husband, but I can only tell him these stories so many times. He's like, I know, man, I know the coyote or the wolf with the purple pimp suit. I got it. And I'm like, it's just so crazy. And then there's
it
stuff that
sounds,
happens,
yeah, it
huh?
sounds wild, but it's, you take it for what it is.
Um, I also have always had, and I know a lot of people are like this, so I know I'm not like unique in this, but it's just something that has always been like animals have always gravitated towards me, and in my dreams, like they've always been incorporated in one way or another as well. And sometimes it'll be a specific animal, but a totally different color than what it should be. And I started looking up like biblical meanings behind specific things that I would dream about. And I would like write, I would try to remember and write stuff down. And then I would look it up and be like, oh my God, that makes sense because of this.
Yeah.
Like I had a simple dream that was on repeat, that I kept walking up the stairs of a house, but this house was like not fully built yet. And the wind picks up really, really, really hard, and the whole house starts like rocking. But I continue walking up these steps, and it's like just never ending. I'm keep going up these steps, and the house is like rocking more and more, and the storm starts picking up. And then the nails start to like come out of the wood in the house, and it's kind of dangerous because they're starting to like bend and like stick out everywhere, so they're exposed. And I'm just like walking and walking, and then my cousin suddenly appears at the bottom, and she's screaming, you can do it, you can do it, just over and over, you can do it. Like I woke up and I sent her a text, and we talk about our dreams a lot. She's the person who, even though we're not super close in my family, it's interesting because we've had the same people appear to us in our dreams on the same night before.
Really?
Uh-huh.
That's pretty cool. That's
Yeah.
that's one of those.
I don't know why we're linked that way, because we're
Yeah.
not the closest. Like we're close, like we love each other, but we're not like, we don't talk all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's just somehow we're linked that way. My grandmother passed of cancer, and she appeared to both of us on the same night. We basically had the same dream, but from our perspectives. So, like, she was going on a walk in the woods, and it was like fall, and it was pretty. The sun was kind of beating through the trees. The leaves were falling, and it was really pretty and peaceful. You could hear the birds tweeting, and she's walking with my mama, and they're having a conversation. Um, Meanwhile, I'm dreaming that I'm with my mama at a creek bed that seemed familiar to me, but in a different place. Um, and I'm barefoot, and I'm just kind of walking around in this creek bed with my pants rolled up, and a white snake starts slithering around my ankles, but I'm not scared of it. It's just like
Right.
going across my feet and kind of tickling me and rubbing on me, almost like a cat would rub on you. And then just like kind of slithers off in the water. It never got on land. I don't know why that stuck in my head. It was only in the water. And my mom all said, "Oh, here comes, your cousin." And she pointed up, and that's when my cousin came walking from the trail, and we had a conversation. And later we ended up kind of translating that conversation, realizing that my mama was telling us that she was pregnant, and she just didn't know it yet. And she ended up being pregnant, and now has that baby, and it's happy and healthy and everything. But it was wild because we both had the dream. She appeared to both of us,
Yeah.
and all the pieces came together. And she's like, "Wait, did you come down from this?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "I came from a trail and pointed down, and Mama said, 'There's your cousin,' and she pointed down at you." And I'm like, "No, she said, 'There's your cousin.' She pointed up at you." And she's like, "And you were in a creek bed, and there was a snake on your feet." And I was like, "What color was it?" And she's like, "I don't know." And I was like, "It was white." And she was like, I didn't know the color, but I knew there was a snake on your feet. Like, because I was the one looking down at it.
That's
So
cool.
it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. That's like,
and it's just so casual to us. And I called her about the house dream, so she like looked it up right there, and she's like, oh, so biblically, rusty nails and wood, like wood in general, has a significance. And it kind of came back to strength, and like you're going through some changes. You're working on like growth and building yourself, but like there are some tribulations, but like your house is still strong. Like it may seem like it's about to fall apart, but it's not. Like you just got to keep going. And it's funny because she was down there, you can do it, like. And that's all the dream was. And it, so it was,
yeah.
It so I mean, I don't know how to explain any of it. I just know that since I was a kid, I've experienced things, seen things. The animal thing, I learned recently what neighborhood resident raven couples are because I posted a picture on Facebook because I was curious about these two birds that were like following me everywhere. And I mean, they kept popping up everywhere. And it was to the point that I was getting footage and footage and footage of these same two massive black birds. And I didn't know if they were crows or ravens, but I knew they were one of the two, and I was curious. And so I posted it, and, the internet was like, oh, it's da da da. And so someone posted a link, and it was like, hey, you've befriended your resident raven couple. And so when you see the big flocks of them, those are, because I had several pictures and videos, like those are juveniles, and they'll kind of travel around in a general area, but they hop from like community to community, learning, looking for food, things like that.
Yeah.
But these resident ravens will settle down somewhere and they stay together forever. And so that couple will be there, and they learn faces. And when people are good to them, they will offer sometimes protection. They'll bring you, shiny things. And if you're mean to them, like say I threw a rock at one of them and they saw me 4 years later, they've been known to remember people's faces years later and like attack them. And
poop on your car or something.
Yeah. You jerk.
Yeah.
But these two ravens in my neighborhood are so like, they know my son's school route, and they'll literally swoop down almost as if to let me know. And I have video footage of it. That's one of the coolest videos I got. Was I didn't know they were out there. They pop up so often, I kind of just like expect them to be there sometimes, but I'm not like looking for them all the time. I'm just going about my business. So that's another thing that I was telling my friends. I was like, this is not me wanting it and like,
Right.
oh, they're out there, and it's like I'll be doing shit, and then boom, they're there and they follow me. And so I got this footage. It swoops down in front of my truck, and then it's just like ends up beside me. And the school route is kind of, we live off an old country road, so it's mostly that old country road, and they'll just follow the whole way. But then when I get out on the main road to the school to do like school drop off, when I'm in school drop off waiting in line, they circle over my truck.
That is neat.
And then when I come back, and I have video footage of them following the truck on the side, I have video footage of them circling, everything. They kept getting closer and closer. I'd been telling my husband about it, and he was like, that's so cool or whatever. About a week or two ago, he walks outside to go to work, and it was the closest it had ever been, and it was just perched right in front of our house. And he goes, whoa. He goes, hey, you're Val's raven, aren't you? And he said it made this like crazy noise at him, and he was like, ah. Like, he was all excited. He was like, your bird talked to me. But I have a neighbor who has an autistic son who's a teenager, and I help take care of him sometimes. And I've been in her vehicle going to pick her son up at his school, which is a completely different school, and a completely different vehicle, and they're still there following.
They recognize
so
you.
Yeah, it's
They're
pretty
super smart. Yeah.
They are, and it's crazy. And then I went down a wormhole with that because I was looking up all, those, and it's just,
Oh yeah.
um, again, it goes back to, it's not like, oh, I think I'm special because I've experienced any of these things. I think everyone can and will. It's just, depending on what your situation is, how open you are to it, what you are allow yourself to believe. And sometimes I don't even know it's necessarily about like believing, it's just accepting that it could be, you know,
Amen.
like,
Amen.
but yeah, that's for oh, one other thing, because sorry, I don't know if you have enough time, but it's not long, but
Yeah, we could get one more in. I
because
do
this
I
is
do have to get up like super early, but let's.
okay. I promise it's really interesting and worth it. This one is probably the one I feel the most. When I say uncomfortable sharing, it's because I feel like people are gonna think that it's like made up or weird the most. But I shared it immediately with my husband when it happened. Well, like 2 days after it happened, I wrote it down because not for this. Like I wrote it down when it happened
Right.
because I wanted to be able to share it with him, but it was like so much. I was like, oh my gosh, how do I even explain this? But basically, I was in my kitchen doing dishes, just standing in my kitchen doing dishes. And all of a sudden, I felt a familiar energy, like I talked about before, but this was a good energy, an overwhelmingly intimate, close energy that turned out to most certainly be my husband, who is still alive and well and with us. And I was so confused.
Yeah.
And what I was getting from him, because again, this whole like telepathic kind of conversation thing always happens. And I don't know if you listen to the telepathy tapes or anything, but you should. it gets brought up a lot. I'm
You're not the
sure you've
first
heard
person to tell
it.
me that.
Yeah, because dude, like it's a whole nother thing, but you just got to listen to it because it it explains that whole the relevance to that, and the connection with this is that when the woman studied it, because I know you already kind of know the premise of it if people have suggested it, but when she studied it and she asked some of these autistic non-speaking kids why telepathy, they said, well, because that's how we were meant to, that's how god gave everyone that gift to communicate, because it's the most um it's the best way to communicate, because you get more information through with just a thought. So like if I'm trying to explain to you what Christmas is in words, it requires thousands of words, and it's exhausting. And if I can just telepathically tell you what Christmas is, you get the whole image, you get the feeling, you understand the snow and the religion behind it, the Christmas tree, the everything, the gifts, the hot cocoa, like you get all of it in one just thought, like boom. And that's kind of how like a lot of these conversations that I say like I experienced happened. It wasn't, even though with my friend when he visited me, like we were having a conversation and I was literally sitting there comfortable, like to the point that it felt like he was just like there. I just didn't see him.
Right.
But it was just all happening through thought, and it was like all at once. And so that's kind of what was happening in this situation. And from what I understood was that he was from another dimension, but it was just him letting me know that we are together in all the lives, and that at least in his, things were really good. And like he specifically mentioned some things that my husband and I have been working on together. And some of those things I had been trying to like explain to my husband, like when we were discussing solutions and growth, and like, well, what do we do to make this happen? Right. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there were things that we literally needed to do here in this life, whether it was with finances, our behavior, whatever, decision making, but it all kind of, I was bringing it back to what God was telling me, And that version of him was already light years ahead in that growth. And he
Wow.
was like letting me know, like, God is in me and God got through to me. And like, you know, I know sometimes you feel like you're the little cuckoo redheaded wife that he just loves. And so he's just going to listen to what you have to say because he loves you so much. But no, he's like, he takes it in, I take it in, like we take it in. And like, God is a big part of my life in this other dimension, but it's, you know, keep doing what you're doing in this one because it's there and somehow we're all tied together and like it affects everything. And that was long before this like dream that just happened the other day, you
Yeah.
know, where God kind of made it clear to me, like, remember, you pray for his protection everywhere, all of the time, in all of the lives. And so if my son exists in these other realities and my mom and my stepdad exist in these other realities, then I would imagine my husband, who I
Naturally.
consider my soulmate, you know,
Yeah.
would exist in these other realities. And we always tell each other, are you going to find me, you know, when we die? And like, whatever happens after life, I'm like, we already have. That's what I always say. We've already found each other. Like, quit trying to figure out how we're going to link back up. Just know we are, you know? And so to end it, I just, because I wrote it down and it was so wild, just so you can kind of, because I guess it'll give you a little bit of perspective about like as it, like right when it happened, like when I wrote my notes, like it's all scribbled, but like in marker I would put like her mind, because I didn't know how to explain this. I
Right.
didn't know how to even write it down and be like, well, he said, who's he the from the, and he was explaining, but it wasn't him here, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I kind of wrote it down like it was a story, and I would be like, her, him. And I literally wrote down like our conversation, like that we had. But again, I was just standing there doing dishes.
Right.
And there were some personal things that like even made a joke about, that like is something only my husband would know.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that joke up, and it was totally my husband's humor. And like just so weird and so bully, and you know, so that's why it's like, I know I'm a creative person and I know my mind can do some creative things, but when these things do happen, it's never because I'm trying to make anything happen. As a matter of fact, there were times when I felt like, man, what's wrong with me? Why do I just feel, it almost feels weird if I go through like a week and I haven't experienced some sort of something.
Right.
Like, I'm like, what's wrong? Like, this, I don't like this normal life.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
like this going through life and like not seeing signs and not feeling things and not questioning, and like it's weird. It's dull. And
Yeah.
what happened? But then sometimes it's like that feels very almost embarrassing to share because it sounds very cuckoo.
Well, I'm
But
glad you did share it. I'm glad you did. To have a communication like that. Now, did he have? Well, I guess he wouldn't because it's an interdimensional kind of thing. I was
what?
gonna say, did he have any recollection? But he wouldn't in this realm. You know.
Like, and did he have any, what do you mean?
Well,
Recollection of like what was,
I answered my own question. I was going to ask, like, does your husband here? Did he have any recollection of that?
oh no.
But I was like, he couldn't have because it was the other
That's
dimension.
why it took me a couple days to explain to him, because how do
Yeah.
you tell someone you visited me?
Yeah.
Like,
That's what you look at him like, I'm proud of you. What? Well, you'll figure it out in a few years. What? You know?
exactly.
Yeah.
And it was kind of though interesting too, because I didn't know he had been questioning himself. And he had been questioning, you know, like, am I not a good enough person for these
Wow.
things to happen to? Stuff like that. You know, everyone always has their own thoughts and own struggles.
Yeah.
And it's easy to, even if you are a thoughtful person and you try to be conscious of the people you care about and what they're going through, there's just no way to pop in their being like that in their brain and know, especially people like us that are constantly, because when you talk to people about their thoughts and personalities, there are most definitely some people it's a lot quieter up there
Oh yeah.
than others. And
Yeah.
so we're both, even though I have a calmness to me, so I've learned how to be calm in the chaos. Like I said, and my mind is oftentimes very chaotic. So it's easy if someone knows that personal side of you for them to come to the conclusion, well, she's had a lot of shitty things happen to her. This is her way of dealing with the trauma. This is scenarios she made up in her head to make sense of stuff that she went through. Like, no, I
Way to
didn't
water it
even
down.
question that shit because I was so, I'm telling you, like, God gave me the strength from a young age. Like, I didn't battle with a lot of those things. I didn't honestly battle with why me. I mean, I'm not saying never did I
Right.
have a moment like that, but that wasn't my personality. It didn't stick with me. That wasn't what drove me.
Amen.
So it didn't come from like, I wasn't looking for any of that. Like, it was a part of me and it was just around me. I don't even consider, oh, that was given to me. Like, I don't think if you experience something that it was given to you, it's just it was gonna happen. You were
Yeah.
either gonna be open to it and experience it, like actually realize it's happening or not. But I mean, that's just my way of thinking of, because I don't think there's like an on and off switch, like, okay, you're special. You get to experience all this stuff now because some of it I didn't want to. I didn't want like my freaky like stepdad's energy bomb to appear
Right.
next to me in already creepy apartment in Houston in the middle of the night. Like, really? I wanted that. Yeah, I wanted that to happen so bad. But it did. And like when my friend came to me, that was literally out of nowhere. It's like if you and I were talking and someone appeared behind you, like it literally was just boom.
Yeah.
Wasn't there 1 second, was there the next. So there's no point in racking my brain trying to explain or figure out why, because I think in the end it'll all make sense somehow. But
Amen.
I'm just trying to understand as much as I can so that I make good decisions and that I can help other people if I can. And whatever happens, happens. And I'm it's also weird to think about how many people you cross paths with that you have no clue you will either have an impact or they'll have an impact on you, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah, no
so
doubt. I can't
I
I can't wait.
appreciate,
I I appreciate you being on here. That's what I was going to say.
yeah.
I have no doubt people are going to reach out about this. Don't be surprised if people want to. It's been a thing lately, and I do not share the information that I have from you. Like I don't share your email. I won't share anything like that. But don't be surprised if people ask if it's okay if you reach
Mhm.
out. And so when that happens, I typically ask them if I can share their email with you. All
Got
right.
you.
So, but don't be surprised if that happens. You got a lot
Yeah,
of,
I didn't think, like I said, when we texted originally, I was like, you asked, and I was like, I don't know, man. I've been binging them, and there's so many more interesting people that you talk. Like, I just didn't think that it would even be anything, that intriguing. But then the more comfortable I got with the thought of sharing those things, I was like, if I listened to it and I was like, oh my God, me too, but different, like this. Oh, me too, but it was like this. Like, that's kind of interesting.
yeah,
And I was like, maybe, again, some of it feels a little embarrassing at times. I have to say that last thing I shared with you is still maybe because it's kind of new and
yeah,
fresh, and I've not ever experienced anything like that.
no,
Maybe that's why it feels embarrassing because I'm still having to accept it myself that it even happened.
yeah.
But for the most part, I'm just comfortable with the weirdness of all of it. And I'm like, as long as, I don't have any more dreams where I can't say Jesus, I'm good because that, that stuff
Amen.
But keep doing what you're doing because it's really cool that you're bringing people together. And I know that you live a pretty diverse, like being a teacher and then doing the whole, like, I know your podcast started as one thing, turned into something else, and you've done the book. And um, it's just really cool. Obviously, like all the people that you've had conversations with happen for a reason. And so I appreciate you at least listening to what God's trying to tell you. Obviously, like, we're all trying to figure this thing out, but just the pure fact that you're doing what you're doing means that you're trying to listen to him. So it encourages me, to just continue, because sometimes you do get tired, and sometimes you do, I can be really, really strong and thick skinned, but every once in a while it's like, well, are the other people right? Am I really just in Delulu land and just trying to make myself feel better? You know what I mean? But that's just the enemy trying to wash away, the power that we have. Because I know that people, the I don't know how to explain. I know you understand, like, that fear is there, and it's interesting to, like, see how the power of God. I'm gonna get this out and leave you to be a promise, but, like, I guess I'm trying to figure the words for it. It's interesting to literally kind of see people uh, dissipate, like runaways, like get away from you, like when you're really, even if you're not interacting with them, it's weird.
Yeah.
When you're really in it with God, people pick up on that without even knowing. And I don't know if they know what it is or if it's just the darkness in them or what it is, but like people will, it's like dropping oil, and water together. It's just so weird to see how quickly, when you're like, okay, God, I'm back with you. Sorry that I fell off for a little bit. And you see that change and like who wants to be around you and who doesn't.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. And you won't, like, there's people that have ran and acted like I did something to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, well, the only thing I've done is been more open about my faith. So see you later, I guess. That mean, I don't know what else to say.
Well, I will say that you made me feel a little more confident in, because I mean, I'm just gonna be vulnerable and being honest and say this, and like, I've apologized to God for it, but sometimes I'm just so tired just dealing with life and all the other stuff that I will mute. Like, I'll be like, I've even put up posts where I was trying to, like, I felt the spirit guide me to say something and motivate people, and people reached out to me and said, oh, I'm so glad you posted that because it meant so much. But I noticed that I would say, because I don't try to push religion on anybody ever. I never have, because I even had points in my life where I said, I'm not religious, I'm just faithful and spiritual. But I don't think that was because I wasn't I always felt like my relationship with God was there, but I do feel earthly things and people and life really worked hard on dampening Jesus specifically. And I would find myself navigating conversations differently, and hearing you, be loud about it in a chill, respectful way is refreshing, because it's just those signs. Like I said, then I've immediately, right when I start saying it again, like, no, you know what? I am going to be loud about my Jesus, like I am, because that's what's gotten me through life. So why wouldn't I? I don't care if it offends someone or they get annoyed. I'm never going to push anything on anybody, but that doesn't mean I have to dampen it or not talk about it or, like, hide that part of myself. And
Amen.
so you really did kind of help spark that back up in me. So I appreciate it.
Thank the Lord. That's great. Thank you.
And I will get your book. I want to read it now. I'm excited.
I
So.
appreciate that. I appreciate you. And come on anytime. I know you got more in the tank. I wish I had more time, but I got to get up early, and I know your husband's probably dying to get conversation rolling too. So
Yeah, the kiddos got the surgery tomorrow, but I'm glad we got to do it, and I appreciate you. And yeah, just have a good night over there. Oh, that's what's his name? The deer.
Oh, that's Gnarls Buckley.
Yeah, Gnarls Buckley. I heard that on the other day on one of your episodes, and I was cracking up. I was like, because I listen all the time, but I think I've only watched like 2 or 3 because I just happened to have I was still for that moment, so I've never actually seen it. I was like, I had pictured him, but yeah, you need to get him a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully this year. So,
Well, have a good night, and thank you again.
hey, thanks, Val. You have a good night too, and God bless you and your family.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
All right, bye bye.
Bye bye.